Hello and welcome to an unexpected podcast. My name is Tim, and with me as always, we have Matt, Mick, Rainier, and Devon. And returning to the podcast is Matthew Hammond.
Morning, everybody.
There you go. Full house today.
Yep. On this week's episode, we're actually going to be going over a list by Matt at 1,000 points. So it'll be our first 1,000-point reviews, which that should be interesting. And then we're going to be going over the army of Lothlorien. So should be an interesting one, but we're going to get
Elves for Christmas.
Time for Christmas. Here we go.
Christmas.
Everyone wondered what our Christmas episode would be, and it is Lothlorien.
Everybody always wondered who the elf on the shelf was. In reality, it's Galadriel. She's just in disguise. But we'll move it over to the list first. So, Matt, I'm actually going to have you speak your case about the list to us.
All right. So while you're putting it up on the screen, 1,000 points. And I've been trying to get this idea of a double caster good army list going. So this is primarily a Erebor reclaimed list with some magic support. So I'll give you my general thoughts about it, and then, we can have some discussion, I guess. But 35 models in this army, so it's a very low model count. Your leader is Thorin King Under the Mountain on a war goat. He's leading an Iron Hills Goat Rider, 12 Iron Hills Warrior with spears, an Iron Hills Warrior with a banner, and 3 Iron Hills Warrior with crossbow and spear. Then you got Big Dane Ironfoot on a pig. He's leading a Goat Rider and 13 normal warriors with spear. And then the interesting part is you get Radagast on a horse, no Sebastian as a 1-drop, and then Galadriel, Lady of Light from the White Council as a 1-drop. So now just for, not that it matters a whole lot, but this is a yellow alliance. So Thorin is from Erebor Reclaimed. I'm actually taking Dane not from the Erebor Reclaimed list, but from Iron Hills so that he can get his auto stand fast at the end if I need it. And Radagast, same deal. He's going to be from Radagast Alliance, so he's a hero of legend. So there's 3 heroes of legend, 1 hero of valor, the way this is taken, and it works out to be a yellow alliance. So on the surface, this might look kind of weird, but here's a few things I'd just like to throw out and get your guys' thoughts on it. So because Dane's in the army, every Iron Hill warrior is fearless within 12 inches. The Lady of Light is one of the only good models that has a Harbinger of Evil, -1 courage effect. Team that up with the fact that Radagast has Aura of Dismay. So you're going to have a 6-inch bubble of -1 courage, 6-inch bubble of your army causes terror. Your army is fearless for all points, for all intents. Free heroic combats on Thorin. Radagast, obviously, with his Nature's Wrath and his Renew if you need it. And if you do happen to face a spirit or a heavy magic caster army, you've got the Lady of Light who is going to throw Fortify Spirit, channeled if needed, on your big dwarf heroes to keep them from being shut down and be able to do anything she wants with Banish beyond that. So the synergy is fearless, causing terror, probably be able to pick your fights as you need, and you've got a lot of ability to go mow down troops with Thorin and Dane, while your Iron Hills dwarves basically just hold the line. What do you guys think? I think the biggest elephant in the room is very low model count at 1,000 points. I'm probably going to be at least 12 under most of what I see. So
yeah, I like though that all your warriors are Iron Hills though. At least that kind of helps. I don't know. That said, I've never played a 1,000 point list before in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
man.
I'm actually. To be honest, maybe I'll relate with 1 or 2 viewers. It just stresses me out, the thought of it. But I'm curious to pick y'all's brain on what you think about how to add Radagast on Eagle, maybe for more hidden power. But I'm also curious just in general what a 1,000 list typically looks like.
So let's talk about 1,000-point lists. Who's here has actually played 1,000? Because I know I do in Canada all the time. All right, perfect. So we got a couple people on here. This is at the point where the armies really do start getting quite a bit larger, because often it's said, and I don't know if it's technically still true in this current meta, but I think it is, that 800 points is really just 600 points with another big hero thrown in. So the numbers really don't change much. But then once you hit that 1,000 mark is when you actually do start to add more numbers with that another big hero that you throw in. I would say, I'm trying to think of what the average is, but even like, what I find in 1,000 points, and Matt and Mick may correct me if I'm wrong, or both Matts, but I found that people tend to get the really big heroes, so you don't really see a massive numbers increase, so, except for armies like Goblin Town and whatnot, Lake Town. But like other than that, like people tend to be like, man, like I want to have Elendil, Aragorn, and Boromir all in the same army, and so obviously, like that was an army I had, and every army I fought, even though I had those 3 big heroes, and this is just one tournament, but multiple other tournaments at 1,000 points, I never experienced it getting too big in the army sizes. What is your guys' experience been?
That's always been the way I saw it. It's like you see a normal 800 point model count army with some really big, expensive models thrown into it. So, I mean, your average is you're seeing low 40s, very low 50s for model count total in the army.
Okay,
but
so
really expensive stuff thrown in.
Do you usually see kind of like what you did, where you add like maybe some casters to protect your heroes and cause shenanigans? Is that kind of like what you
usually what
see?
I see? Or they find more excuses to bring in the dragons, the Mumak war leaders, there's just the big stuff starts being brought in mass, and then they start upgrading things. Matt Iverson and Mick, is that what you guys have experienced?
Well, so I've seen various things, including one time I played a 155 model Goblin Town list.
855 models?
No, a 155.
Models. Oh, 100. Okay, sorry.
I had 6 models on my side. I played an all-hero army.
That's right. That was a Throne of Skulls. I was there. I remember that.
I remember beating that army too.
You did beat that.
Even though it was an objective-based game. Now, so I was thinking, at 1,000 points, do you normally expect to be playing on a 4x4 or a 6x4?
Now, okay, so that's actually a great question, because it depends on what state and country you're from.
I've only played it on a 4x4.
It's usually always on a 4x4, except at Throne of Skulls. That's the only place where it changes.
See, in the UK, I feel like it might be more of a 6x4.
Which would you prefer if you had a personal choice?
With this army, I would definitely prefer a 4x4.
yeah, exactly. With this army, 4x4. But if you were to play this on a 6x4, then everything changes drastically.
Let's assume a 4x4 for this, because while it's more common in the UK, I don't know that worldwide it's more common. Because I do go to Throne of Skulls yearly, and I've seen the 6x4 format. And you're right, it is way different than that extra 2 feet. So. But let's assume a 4x4. If you're able to do that, Mick, I don't know if you've ever played 1,000-point games on 4x4s.
I don't think so. Except maybe like 15 years ago when Gandalf was still on the Eagle.
That's.
No, so I think if this was a 4x4, then I think this is pretty solid. I'm not 100% convinced about the need for Lady of Light here, because of all the defense 8 everywhere. And Radagast on horse, I'm kind of also thinking, just like Rainier, that I wouldn't mind an eagle in there. But it's very difficult to actually drop anything in order to get the eagle, because as soon as you drop anything, you're going down to like 30 models. And even though, as you guys are saying, that let's say high 40s, early low 50s might be the average, you will run into much bigger armies, or much more sort of armies filled up with heroes like the Elendils and the Boromirs, who even don't really particularly care about the defense 8 necessarily. So yeah, I feel like Lady of Light, in my opinion, doesn't really give enough here, but I'm just trying to figure out what else I would take.
I mean, one of the things that I've found I bump into at 1,000 points is people tend to find the points to throw in that siege engine they've always wanted.
Right.
And Lady of Light is, I think, with this army kind of essential to help mitigate that, because you could spend a lot of time trying to waddle toward that siege engine, and if you don't have the Lady of Light with you, you could take a lot of damage before you get there.
Well, yes. However, if you're bubbling everything around Lady of Light, then every time that siege engine hits, it hurts.
It's going to hit more. Yeah, but this is a list, because it's so slow, that isn't really going to be able to spread out much anyway. That's one of the problems with the 5-inch movers is, if you spread out so much that you've got more than 2 inches between each of your guys, you're so spread out, you're never going to get back together again, and you're never going to get that. At that point you've lost, right? Because you're never going to get any of your benefits of your shield wall anymore, and you're going to get kind of taken to pieces.
What are your guys' thoughts? Because it is kind of a slow move in on. I don't I've never played the list, but how necessary are the goat riders? I just see them because they're 20 points.
I actually think they're very necessary.
Yeah, they're good for grabbing objectives. I mean, I think he's done the right thing and had only a couple of them here. I mean, one thing that I would like to see. All right, so I know I get made fun of for saying this a lot, but I've played a list like this. It was in a different edition. It was Lady of Light with it was back before the Iron Hills time. So I had the Erebor dwarf. It was the same type of thing where I had a bunch of tough dwarves that stood in front of 2 casters, one of whom was Lady of Light. That list, though, had a bunch more shooters, and that's what I think I would like to see in this list more. Because rather than attempting to waddle towards your opponent, I think given that you've got Lady of Light in the list, you probably want to set it up so that unless somebody has got, a scary siege weapon or, their own blinding light and a tremendous number of shooters, I think you want to set it up so that they have to come to you. And I think maybe, and I don't think you need a huge amount of additional shooters, but if you took it up to maybe 6 or 8 crossbows, that would be enough.
Because no one's going to shoot back anyway.
What about Radagast for the ballista?
Well, his whole main strategy was that whole terror bubble around Lady Light. That was something he really wanted.
That's totally
I
true.
actually was almost considering. So ballista, I actually agree with. I think actually I would try to get it in this list personally, at least to break. I mean, if he's not going to do the crossbow option, but I mean, otherwise,
I mean, you could do ballista instead of Lady of Light, because that kind of solves some of her problems, or solves some of the problems she solves, and then you get 5 more points to give Radagast Sebastian. I mean, another thing you can do is for 10 more points you can get Saruman, and you do sacrifice the terror bubble, but you trade it for the ability. You trade it for the ability to really reach out with that 18-inch compel and the 12-inch sorceress blast and really do some damage at range. And that may be something to think about, because once you have that 18-inch compel, your half-dozen crossbows become a lot scarier, because if the other guy has blinding light, then what you can start doing is start pulling figures or even heroes outside of that 6-inch bubble and then shooting them. Pull the next one out and then shoot them. And that forces the other guy to come to you, even in circumstances when he might otherwise not have to.
That would be so nasty. They're like, "Oh, I'm in my blinding light. Oh, sorry."
Yep.
No, he's not.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. And what would you say then to also adding the ballista instead of the Lady of Light?
That would work too. I mean, another thing I thought about, if you wanted to up your model count, you can replace Thorin on Goat. So if you were to get Bard, Alfred, the girls, and then fill up the rest of his warband. It points out at around 308 points, I think, which leaves you with 10 points to turn Radagast on horse into Saruman on horse. And then you could take a bunch of your Iron Hills guys and stick them into Dane's warband, including the banner, probably, and including the goat, to bulk up Dane's warband to full. Dane's a hero of legend, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you could have 18 dwarves, you would have 18 lake towners, and then 4 heroes. So that would bring you up to 40 models. So that's a way to
just
get
for
it
people
bigger.
listening, the reason he's hero of legend is because I'm allying him in from Iron Hills.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to do to get his bonus. Well, actually,
No, yeah.
wait, does he get his?
No, he doesn't get his army bonus.
He doesn't get his
just
army
becomes
bonus.
a hero of legend that allows to stand fast.
Allows to stand.
So real quick thing on removing Lady of Light. So this army is using Iron Hills to hold the line and then heroes to smash through. At 1,000 points, I'll be shocked if you're not fighting a whole bunch of magic. You remove Lady of Light and Radagast and turn it into Saruman, who has no protection.
No, I think if you're changing Radagast to Saruman, you keep Lady of Light. You do Lady of Light and
then that was one thing. Like I heard that and I'm like, I think he's gonna get shut down so fast.
And you need a fortify spirit at some point.
Well, in this list, because your Iron Hills aren't doing the bulk of the damage. It's your 2 heroes, and then that's another issue I have with this. I played a list very similar to this. It was all Fountain Court Guard, and it was Boromir of the White Tower, Elisar before the ban restriction of the FAQs. In fact, I'm pretty sure I influenced that, and then Elendil.
That sounds essentially the same as this list.
Yeah, it's essentially the same, except I had 3. It's the same idea, almost same concept, but I had 3 much harder hitting heroes in a sense, where you have Thorin, who's kind of almost mirror to Boromir because they both don't get the +1 to wound. I had the flag. And then you have Dane, who kind of has a hitting power of Aragorn. And so then you have like Elendil. Instead, you have Radagast on horse. And I almost was considering, what about Thranduil, who also gives you the terror bubble, but I'm trying to figure out where 160 points gets him. But if you can get him the horse and the double blades, you're getting still the terror bubble. You're still getting Nature's Wrath. But I don't know, after Radagast cast that spell, I don't know how much value he's adding at 160. Like, I do agree that Saruman probably is adding more value in this particular list. You have Nature's Wrath, but at 3-inch range, it's like you got to be so close to cast it. Other than that, he's immobilizing something, which is nice. So that if you're not putting him on an eagle,
and Exceed too, which turns out to be kind of sneaky.
Okay, and that is very sneaky. And I'm not certainly taking away that, but I'm just like, if your goal is to beat through your opponent faster than they can beat through you, then you either need this guy on an eagle, which you don't have the points for, unless you get rid of Lady of Light. And at that point, you have 3 major threats. So that is a consideration. You can almost throw away Lady of Light in a sense, and then throw him on an eagle. But obviously, you're not relying on the Hour of Dismay as much because he's going to be super mobile. I mean, that's a thought I would go, but that's just for me. I'm like looking at it. I'm like, if you're going to have Lady of Light, you need her if you only have 2 threats. And I just don't think Radagast has a 3rd threat, which I understand you're saying he's not, that wasn't his intent, but I don't know how much he's doing for you in a list this tiny.
Yeah. And that was kind of you've kind of hit on my concern is is it enough with just the 2 big heroes and the 2 heavy magic?
And I don't believe it is. Okay. I think you need a 3rd major threat. I mean, the thing is, when I played that list, and like I said, these are 2 very similar lists, the one I played and the one you're trying to do now. When I did that, there were a lot of times my army got stretched out by much larger lists, and 2 of my heroes had to handle a major problem, which they had magic users like trying to punish one of them. The other one was slicing through, getting to whoever was doing that. And then the other one is going to handle some other part of the field. And I feel you're going to have that same issue because Thorin's not going to kill as fast as you're going to want him to. I know it sounds shocking for me to say because he has like free hero combats, but he doesn't have, in my opinion, what puts every hero on the top tier, and that's +1 to wound. Any hero that we talk about that we fear usually has +1 to wound or some way to triple dice or some crazy nonsense. In this case, you are swinging, unless you're going cavalry, that's great. But I mean, other than that, like if you name any hero that we really get threatened by, generally they have that +1 win. I don't think he's going to kill that fast. So realistically, like he'll do his damage. The free hero combats is great, but I just don't think you're killing fast enough with this list. I think you need Radagast on an eagle, or you need something else. So, that's my opinion.
I think. Well, all right. Couple thoughts. I mean, you sacrifice the fear. One way to up the killing is by putting Bard in, because that's another free heroic combat. And instead of putting him in for Thorin, I suppose you could put him in for Dane, but you lose a lot when you lose Dane. I wonder if just swapping out Radagast for Saruman is enough because of Saruman. I mean, Saruman's Sorceress Blast almost kind of makes him another hitter, because he can reach out and knock people off, blow people off of horses. And I think maybe that the combination of Lady of Light and Saruman together may be enough to be your third threat, because he's got kind of the offensive power at range, and she's got the ability to fight and also protect everybody else from casters. And I don't know. I wonder if that's enough. I think I would
just don't know
definitely
that they're
switch.
killing things. They're threats. So when we talk about 3 threats in a list, I agree that they're threat, like the combo of them too. But this list is solely relying on the heroes to do all the work. And at 1,000 points, you can fight some really big armies. Are Saruman and Lady of Light enough of a hitting power to be that third?
I think together they are, because I mean, Lady of Light is still heroic striking, fight 6, 3 attacks at strength 4, and you've got Saruman, who has the ability to kind of like shut down a hero a turn on the other side.
And there is an interesting thing about Lady Light that I really want to bring up for anyone listening, is also her ability to really seriously disrupt formations, and the fact that she has Instill Fear that she casts every turn.
Right.
So that is something, I'll just throw that out there, that, yeah, that's another reason I do like her in the list of this particular sword. But that's where the combo of your little terror bubble with -1, which, by the way, I think will be a little less relevant than you might want it to be. I think Lady of Light's going to be moving around too much for it really to matter.
Yeah.
You're going to have to keep them together. And even if you do, I don't think the whole army is really going to benefit from it. So it's a cool gimmick. I'll give it that. But I don't like, unless you channel Hour of Dismay, and then on top of that, like the problem is Lady of Light only does it in a 6-inch area, whereas like Ringwraiths do this in a much further. So like, when Evil does this whole all terrifying army trick, it really can pull off pretty well. But in your army, I mean, you're small enough. I'll agree with that, but I think too many missions are going to branch you out.
Where you have to split and lose that.
I mean, if you want to do that terror bubble thing, I think you're better off trading in one of your hitters for Thranduil with the Magic Hat.
Yeah.
Because then the terror bubble is kind of going to be in the center of the action. Because Radagast has to like hang out. A Radagast on horse has to hang out behind the lines to have that thing up, and it doesn't kind of penetrate as deeply as you want it to.
How big can we get Thranduil at 160 points? Like, what can you get?
Well, so hold on. Wait.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering also about Thranduil, and if we really wanted to put him into 190, because like ideally you kind of want to kill him out as much as possible. So I just had a question for you guys. What whether you would at all consider Dwalin instead of Dine in order to grab the points for Thranduil?
So you're upgrading Radagast to Thranduil by downgrading Dane to Dwalin?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Really, the only thing you lose is the fearless troops.
You do lose the fearless troop. Go ahead.
I think it's a good.
I mean, losing the fearless troops is, I guess, kind of a big thing. Although it is less of an issue because you don't have the army bonuses here, which give a lot of extra stuff to Dane.
It's not a terrible trade. It's actually, I mean, you're keeping the hitting power, which is, Dwalin obviously hits like a tank.
I assume he's on Goat.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The funny thing is I actually originally built this list that way so I could put Radagast on his sleigh. And then playing around with it, I swapped to Dane and put Radagast on a horse. And
Interesting.
I actually liked that.
Interesting note: if you remove Lady of Light in that list, then you get all your bonuses back. That's just an interesting note. But
or if you take Gandalf instead of Lady of Light, it gives you the blinding light, not the fortified spirit.
That's like 50 points you got to find somewhere.
Well, you'd have to remove Radagast. You'd have to remove Radagast and Lady of Light.
But we're talking about
but Gandalf can take. But Gandalf can take troops, right? I mean, so
can Thranduil. Thranduil can take action.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I'm thinking of is Dane, Thranduil, Radagast, Dane, Thranduil, Gandalf, all with troops.
Okay, so in that case, if you're going to bring, in my opinion, if you're going to bring the Lake Towners, you either need one hell of a front line, which is, you got one, just make sure you keep that up, or you need a lot more numbers because, I mean, they're just so squishy.
Well, I think you would at that point. I mean, that becomes a very different list, but I think it does have a lot more numbers. I think you could probably fill out most of those 3 warbands or pretty close to it.
So I guess before we end up kind of finalizing this whole thing, what I'm trying to do for him, and as we've done for many viewers, a lot of times we try to keep the list within the context of what he's trying to do. And he had 2 that he mentioned, which was, obviously he's making the heroes do all the work while the men hold the line, the small list hold the line. And that's one idea, which is why we keep throwing out the 3 threats, like, Thranduil or get Radagast on an eagle. And the second thing he's trying to do is the whole terror bubble idea, which I didn't hear any counter to, but I think we're all kind of throwing out that one a little bit. So, but if you're going to keep it, maybe Thranduil is a better way to go. I just want to focus on those things because we are mentioning the alliance thing. And honestly, I think you get a stronger list if you take Matt's idea. If you ally Bard or make it a battle of 5 armies kind of format, these are proven lists, Articon winning lists. They work. And so, but I'm really hesitant to give the advice of ally around because it does become a different list. Matt, do you disagree with any of that? Or
yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, I think changing out Radagast, if you wanted to do the least amount of surgery on this, I would change out Radagast for Saruman and find 10 points somewhere. And I think that, and then, so maybe like drop an Iron Hills Warrior, get 2 more crossbows, and get Saruman on horse. That's kind of the minor surgery. And then if you wanted to do major surgery, then I think you go to like the Battle of 5 Armies thing that we were talking about.
I think I'm going to agree with Mick and say that I love his idea of downgrading Dane on Pig to Dwalin. That's a heavy penalty. I get it, but he still kind of does the job, what you're trying to get at.
Still does the same thing when
he does very similar roles. Yeah, and then upgrade Radagast to Thranduil fully kitted out. That's the list that I think I would be terrified of that list. I see what it's trying to do, and I'm like, okay, like I've got 3 heroes that are all fortified up, and then not only that, but my troops are going to be constantly like feared away, and you're still casting the terror. You're still, you're getting a lot of what you need. You don't have a lot of magic to control the enemy, which, obviously Matt's idea of Saruman solves, but I just think you have enough pain here. I still would also do Matt's idea of adding 3 more crossbows if I could probably try it somewhere. But that's my vote. So, but
nice. So Matt, what I want to ask you real quick before we move on to the list, what was, and so you can just give a quick description of this. What was your main intent with this list? Like, were you trying to keep it purely based around Iron Hills, or were you willing to ally? And then real quick, whose idea do you think you would take?
My main idea with the list was centered around free heroic combats with Thorin, having an elven made weapon in there, and Dane doing all the killing power. So this was an offensive list with those 2 guys. And then the thought was, how do you keep them from just being transfixed out of their mind or neutralized? And how do you keep low model count from becoming a problem? So that's why all the magic and trickery kind of centered around that. Honestly, I'm trying to think, when I think of whose advice. I actually liked all three, and there was one that we didn't even explore that I'd be curious on, because the idea of putting Ratty on an eagle, I know we didn't talk about that much, and you lose his staff of power, but that seems really potent. And
you got to get rid of the Lady of Light. I
Yeah.
can't see the points. I think all of us didn't bring it up because you're so points heavy.
Yeah, it's probably not.
So-
That becomes another major surgery. So with that being said,
it's kind of minor in the sense that if you just get rid of Lady of Light, you now get a really serious third hitting threat, and then you get more dwarves. So it's not a bad idea, but you just would have to accept that that's what you're doing.
exactly.
Yeah, you become much more vulnerable to magic at that point, losing the staff and losing the Lady of Light.
Yeah, and don't people bring a lot of magic at 1,000 too? That's what I would be.
And the siege weapons.
I've seen magic and siege weapons almost every 1,000 points.
Every 1,000, yeah. So siege weapons, Matt's idea of the whole siege weapon thing, you're going to become more vulnerable. So.
Okay, so which advice am I most likely to take? Probably all of it, but because I want to try and do something original versus going to a battle of 5 armies, I think adding crossbows and putting Saruman in the list kind of still gives me at least the semblance of an original army that people don't see all the time. And I want to try and do something a little bit new. So that's probably the one I'll do. Dropping, and honestly, if you do that, dropping Dane for Dwalin. So those are probably the two things.
Okay. Thank you for your list, Matt. Anybody else in the comment section, when they leave their list, if you could leave like a general idea of what you like with your list, so like if you want us to keep it based around a certain theme, that'll be really helpful for us, so that we don't go in 9 billion directions trying to make it work, kind of a thing. So like if you have a general idea of I want to take this list and I want these specific things based in it, that'd be really helpful for us as well when you leave your list. All right, and now we're going to be going over Lothlorien. We're going to go into the army bonus real quick, and then Matt, I'll have you go over Galadriel because I know you got to leave shortly. But for the army bonus, basically they get resistant. The whole army, including the troops, gets resistant to magic. Would you guys is this an army bonus to you guys where you're like, I have to keep this, or are you guys okay with losing it for a yellow bonus?
I've been playing Lothlorien a lot lately because I just kind of finished up the army. It was one of my COVID armies, and I always try and engineer it so that I keep this bonus. I mean, part of it I think depends on your meta. I mean, obviously if you're playing in an area where you're just not going to see magic, then who cares? But if you're playing in an area where you're going to see magic, or especially if you're going to be seeing a lot of ring race or a lot of Angmar, stuff like that, this army bonus is really something you have to think hard about giving up. And it's not just the troops. It's the fact that you've got some really hard-hitting heroes and casters who suddenly become resistant to magic as well. And as we talk through some of these profiles, I'll try and explain kind of how you can play some of these guys differently if you have the army bonus. And going from there. But, there is a downside to it in that because of whom this list can ally with, and I think the green allies are the Fellowship and Rivendell.
And Rohan.
And Rohan, yeah.
Randomly.
It does kind of constrain you. Rohan's the only one where you can kind of get numbers, right? That's really the only one where you can kind of get cheap figures. But yeah, this is among the army bonuses that you really have to think hard about giving up.
Actually, Tim, just curious on your opinion of it. You're a person who plays against Lothlorien every week of the year for the last 4 years. How annoying has resistance to magic been to you?
Yeah, so basically, I play a guy. He's very, very good at the game, and he almost exclusively takes this army. So when I play SBG, I'm playing this army. I 1000% agree with Matt that resistant to magic has been so annoying to go up against, where you just kind of I don't ever dropping it personally. I mean, I just think about every game. I play all these different armies against it, and the amount of times that resistance to magic, not having to use will, is so clutch, whether that be on a simple warrior like a guard of the Galadriel court where you're trying to move it to get it out of the way, or the heroes just basically going, you know what, even when I'm done, I'm still here. with will, especially on like your lower heroes like Haldir and Rumel, where you really want them to be able to resist. I mean, it's such an incredible thing for this army specifically. So I would absolutely do your best to get this as a Green Alliance.
I will agree with you guys with one caveat. Don't do it just to get rid of one really, really good army bonus. Do it to get rid of two amazing army bonuses. The only time I would do it is with a Fanghorn throw in here, because having an Ent inside of Lothlorien is brutal, as my little brother proves all the time.
I'd be interested in the thoughts on that one, but I've never heard of that.
I mean, if you want to put this in perspective, think of how many points you would pay to have a half-strength fortified spirit instantly cast on your entire army, because that's essentially what this is.
Yeah.
I'd imagine, like Tim alluded to it, I'd imagine it takes those like low tier one will heroes and just maximizes them.
Well,
Like I know you come across a Huron or something and you're like, oh yeah, just like transfix them or whatever. You can't do that with a Haldir or a Rumel in this list, because now they have 1+1.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a very elegant way to put that, actually. Matt Iverson, like when you said it like that, I'm like, it's a very good point.
I mean, it is to a point where you almost want to tear your hair out when you try to move that one Galadriel court guard, because he has that fight 6 perhaps on a regular warrior that you just fight, because you just fight those regular warriors and you need your heroes to kind of move on. And when you just can't move that one guy because you're casting Immobilize or Transfix or Compel when you're trying to get them out of the way, it's the most frustrating thing in the world when they resist that.
We just talked about like 1,000 point lists. Like, I wonder if this army bonus gets even better at 1,000 points.
It actually kind of scales up, yeah.
Yeah, it scales up because everyone's going to be bringing those add-in casters, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, my whole army doesn't really care.
I want to, before we get into Galadriel, I mean, everybody will have their own opinion on this. I'm going to give mine just because I play it all the time. I think this is the most balanced Elven army list there is. It has pretty much everything that you want. It has relatively big heroes at good point costs. It has really good captains at higher point costs that can do a lot of good things. You can get a lot of troops at defense 6. You have fight 6.
Going into a lot of spoilers there, Tim. A lot of spoilers.
so we'll get into it, but I think it's the most balanced, cost-effective elf army in the game, or really for anything that's high fight value in the game. Really,
I know some would disagree and say they lack horses, but you know.
Oh, besides the horses, I mean, we'll get on to the horses, because my gosh, with those horses.
Stay tuned for controversy in Lothlorien. They have horses.
Okay, so Matt, I'll bring it over to Galadriel for you.
All right, so Galadriel is the legendary hero of this list. She comes in at 130 points. She's got Elf, Lorien, Infantry, Hero keywords. Move 6, fight 6, hits on a 3+ for whatever you need that for. Strength 3, defense 3, 1 attack, 3 wounds, courage 7, 3 might, 6 will with a freebie per turn, 3 fate. Galadriel is unarmed, but she has the ring Nenya, which means she rerolls all failed fate rolls. She's got heroic resolve, heroic defense, heroic channeling. She can bring the Mirror of Galadriel, which I'll just run through that real quick. The mirror is a heavy object with a defensive 8, 3 wounds. It is deployed within 6 inches of Galadriel at the start of the game. For scenarios that require both armies to move onto the board, any model within Galadriel's warband may carry it. During the end phase of each turn, one friendly hero model within 6 inches may restore their fate points to the starting value. So she can bring that with her for the low cost of 25 points. She also gives you an option to upgrade Galatream Warriors to Galadriel Guard at 1 point per model, which basically takes them to Courage 6. Now, special rules before we're done with this very long profile. She's got Terror, Woodland Creature, and she's got the Lady of Lothlorien, which means she gets a free point of will per turn. Her spells: Blinding Light, casts on a 2+, Blessing of the Valar, 3+, Immobilize 3+, Command at a 4+. So she's obviously a very, very good spellcaster. I will say just a few thoughts and then ask you guys what you think, but I'll probably just state the obvious. Great spellcaster. It's kind of a bummer that she's a hero of a legend, being unarmed and being that squishy. I think that becomes the focal point of why some people think Lothlorien has some issues.
Is she squishy
I
though?
was just gonna. Yep.
Heroic defense, if you want to burn
Heroic
the light on
defense
that. Yeah.
is the bane of my existence.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
goodness.
I saw a lot of hands go up. Go.
Heroic defense and 3 rerollable fate, and when she brings the mirror, she gets all of those back.
She's actually kind of hard to kill.
Boy, is she hard to kill.
I have run an Iron Hills chariot into her at Articon 5 turns in a row. She never even got wounded.
That's awesome. All right, I said that just to tee you guys up. I did that on purpose.
I literally pivoted the chariot because I'm like, all right, let's just kill the troops, ignore her. Like, I cannot kill her.
Excellent point. Excellent point. So the non-squishy, hard to kill anything with her variant.
It is hard to kill things with her, though.
It is hard to kill things with her. That is indubitably the case.
Now I'm curious, and this
thing
is probably
is
where some of
tricky one.
mixed critique comes from, but I'm curious, how important is it, in y'all's opinion, to have a hero, your hero being like a killing hero? Because I know Contest of Champions, like it's pretty important, but for a tournament scene, like how important would you
It's not
think?
necessarily important for your leader to be a killing hero. Like there's plenty of leaders who are like Saruman who only have 1 attack. It's quite important for your leader to actually be able to kill something. And that's the tricky part with her, because whilst being unarmed, you get -1 to win combat and you get -1 to wound. So with strength 3, even to win something like a defense 6 model, you have to be spending might to actually do anything. And so, like, I generally don't like Galadriel just because of the legend status and the fact that she has to be your leader in this army. Like, if, let's say, Celeborn was a hero of legend, I would love Galadriel to be there every time. But it's just that annoying thing of, well, yeah, she never dies, but she never kills anything either.
Well, is there a scenario other than Contest of Champions where your hero has to do the killing?
No, it's literally one scenario of 18.
And there's a whole bunch of scenarios where you get points for killing,
general alive.
keeping the general alive. And Galadriel is so here's the flip side to the argument, Nick. Because she doesn't really kill anything, there's no reason to expose her, right? So she's behind this wall of fight 5 and fight 6 elves, probably standing next to the mirror with blinding light up. And boy, I mean, you basically have to kill the entire rest of the army before you're going to get to her. And I'm not sure the fact that she's not going to be performing in Contest of Champions is enough to outweigh the number of victory points you're going to save by just making sure you've got a leader who can still kind of make her points back through spells and through the mirror that's so darn hard to get to and so darn hard to kill.
Honestly, the Contest of Champions, I'm just going to remove that one out the way since this is one of the most common arguments against her. I agree with Matt's point. 1, it's one of 18 scenarios, but 2, her job is really to stop the opposing hero from killing anything before you wipe him out. And I know Rainier can definitely attest to this, where I played a game against him where he had Dalimer and I had Gandalf and Radagast, and Dalimer didn't kill a single thing the whole game, and I was playing hobbits. So, I mean, like, her ability to shut down the enemy hero is really how you would win, at least long enough to get him killed and then get her 1 kill by trapping or something like that. I mean, it's harder, certainly, but
yeah, I mean, there is very little to no risk to sending her in against an ordinary guy.
Yeah,
because especially assuming she's got the mirror, because you send her in with a couple of buddies, or you put a spear behind her, or a pike behind her, or something like that. And, if she gets the kill, she gets the kill. And, if she doesn't get the kill, the worst that's going to happen is she's going to take a wound that she's going to fade off and get that fight back anyway. I mean, unless she's going up against something that's, got 3 attacks and is going to knock her down and trap her and do like 6 wounds at the same time, she's essentially invulnerable. I mean, she is invulnerable to an ordinary warrior. 1 or 2 attacks is just not going to, even with it defense 3, she's just going to fade all that off and those wounds are going to go away. It's like she never took them. And that gives you a freedom to kind of throw her in late in the game to get a couple kills without risking her.
The gentleman I play is Nick Gardner, and basically his one complaint about this army every single time is always Contest of Champions. That's the one thing he's still trying to figure out, but there's not really I think the best solution is what Devon said, where you just try to mitigate their hero while trying to maybe get a kill or two, but you do like the whole pack thing where maybe you have a swordsman and a spear behind with Galadriel and a spear, and you get that 4v1 action, and then you try to get Galadriel to get the kill, that kind of a thing for contest. One thing I want to ask you guys, I have my own opinion on this. I'm sure you're going to have the same opinion as me, but is Galadriel in every list you take with Lothlorien or no?
No.
Anybody else?
I mean, I don't play Lothlorien that much, if at all, but if I ever play Lothlorien, it's generally as an ally to bring in the spear supports. So I guess in that sense of alliances, probably not. If I'm thinking pure Lothlorien, and I imagine your question is centered around that,
yeah,
I'm
mostly.
really interested to hear what Matt has to say, because if I'm doing pure Lothlorien, other than that resistance to magic thing, I'm just going to play another Elven army like Mirkwood or, Rivendell. But I'm very interested in what Matt has to say. But I have a lot more experience for Rivendell and Mirkwood than I do this army. So
I would take Galadriel at 700, 750 points and above. And I would not take her below 700 points. Because below 700 points, kind of at 650 and below, you can't really just take a caster that's not going to double up as somebody who can kill troops. And that's what she is. You also aren't going to have enough heroes in your list to really benefit from the mirror. Because I think the point that Guy made earlier about this is an army list where the benefits really kind of scale up is true for Galadriel, especially with the mirror. I mean, if I'm going to take kind of a high points list, I'll take Galadriel and I'll take the mirror, and then I'll make sure that every one of my other heroes has 3 fate to really get the benefit out of that mirror. I think below 700 points, I'm taking Celeborn as the leader, and then a couple of smaller heroes to go with it. But
now, wasn't you guys that started the trend of bringing Guahir to carry the mirror around?
That's Pennsylvania, which by the way is a perfectly good way to go.
Yeah,
I don't mean to be dissing on that, but it's just we've talked about that so many times, and I think we've taken that example. There's
all right.
Nothing wrong with doing that.
Okay.
Pennsylvania strong, boys. Pennsylvania strong.
Yeah, that's a decent way to go with the mirror.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'll agree with others that she's definitely not the strongest hero ever, but I think 750 and above, I really wouldn't think otherwise. I mean, at 650 and below, is this army? Yeah, I guess we'll have to get into that in the end of it. But I'm just at that point, I'm just going to play Mirkwood or something else that's stronger. But I mean,
I got to tell you, I've been playing a 600 point list of this. And I mean, I've been playing primarily against Evan, and part of it is Evan likes to take ring wraiths, and ring wraiths do not like to play against this list at all.
And that's true.
Or do I know that?
Yeah, but it is if you go a 600 point pure Lothlorien list, then if we have time, we'll talk through some of the lists I've been taking. This is a surprisingly tough list to deal with. And you don't think it's because you don't think it's got all that much because it doesn't have mounted heroes or whatever, but it is a surprisingly hard list to deal with when you've got, because I mean you can get some numbers in here that I think are hard to get with some of the other Elven lists. But anyway, we should go on. I mean,
well, do you ever take Galadriel without the mirror?
No.
Okay. So for all viewers out there, always take her. She's effectively.
Does everyone agree with that?
But by the way, I think you can take Galadriel without the mirror. I tend not to, because if I'm going to put Galadriel in with a mirror, I'm going to construct a list that gets the most out of the mirror. Like the all 3 fate heroes, if I can. And I mean, I think my record is at this point getting 11 extra fate in a game out of the mirror, which when you think about it was 11 wounds dealt to heroes that just disappeared. You know?
Actually, so one last. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just trying to think. I know she's got the spell that brings your fate back. So
I would never waste time on that spell.
That's what I was going to say. I can see an argument for not bringing it, but what else are you going to do for 25 points that gets you as much benefit as the mirror? So I think after all that pondering, I agree. I don't think I ever would bring her without it.
Yeah, that spell, I mean, the Blessing of Valar, for anyone who doesn't know, it does restore a single fate point. And if you don't have the mirror, then sure, I can understand the use of it. But the fact that you're spending time, instead of immobilizing an enemy hero or commanding someone into a very vulnerable position, you're now like restoring fate. I would feel I feel like I'm wasting turns of magic if I'm doing that. I feel like I could be doing something far more threatening. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, which I'm pretty sure we all are going to agree on this. Is it ever worth it to upgrade your Galadriel to the Galadriel?
Never.
Nope. Never. Nope.
I'm not even sure why this was added into her profile, because like just reading it, you're like, I'm never doing this.
Well, it's for when you're building your list and you are 1 point away from maxing out your points and you don't know what to do with it.
Give somebody a spear.
What if everybody already has a spear? I don't know.
Give somebody a bow.
All right. Never do this, ever.
Okay.
So in that case, are we generally agreeing that we would be taking Galadriel at something like 700 or 750 and above?
750 and above.
But we would not.
Does
be
anybody
taking
have
Galadriel
any
below.
disagreements about 700 or below 700 points?
About not taking Galadriel at that level. I personally can possibly see a list where I can see Matt's argument that you can't capitalize on the mirror as much, but at 700, below 700, let's say 600 points. I'm trying to think about it. You got 150 for Galadriel, and then how much is Guahir? I guess
100
It's
and
like 150 as well.
50?
like 150 as well. So you have
Yeah.
like 300 invested plus another 150 in L's. At 600 points, it's possible that might work, because then you have some points left over.
I was not considering the Guahir gimmick. You know, I could see the Guahir gimmick
At 600.
at 600. Yeah.
So if you have a very powerful hero that's now practically invulnerable, you have the numbers still, you have it's possible. I think it's possible, but overall, I think Matt's going to be more right than not, that Galadriel at less than 600 is going to be a little bit hard.
So
Actually,
that
here's
is
an
great,
interesting
but only
thought.
at high points. Okay.
What about Radagast on Eagle with the mirror?
Oh, there you go. There's another one.
Well, I
No,
guess
that's
the
cavalry model.
that's cavalry model. Yeah. Well, and the Eagle doesn't have.
Oh
the
yeah,
fate.
yeah.
Radagast has the fate. So all right,
That's
never
right.
mind.
Oh yeah, for anyone who is not sure why that. So the Eagles are infantry, so therefore they can carry the mirror around. But Radagast on an Eagle can't do that. So.
Okay, so we can cut here. Matt, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite, guys. Always fun to talk. Take care.
All right. Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, man.
Bye bye. But by the way, is that right? I mean, can 'cause I
Cavalry
thought
can't carry heavy objects.
cavalry? Well, but monsters can. Monsters treat heavy objects as light objects, and the Eagle is a monster.
Yeah, but a cavalry model can't pick up any.
I think their restriction is actually Matt raises a very
Oh, that's
interesting conundrum, because that's interesting, because if they treat it as a light object, then that would remove the restriction. So is Radagast on Eagle still? Well, it has to be a monster. Yeah, I guess it depends
Yeah,
on
it still
the
has a
wording.
monster keyword. It has a monster keyword. I guess the issue would be 2 people would need to hand the heavy object to Radagast on the Eagle, because I'm not sure Radagast on the Eagle could pick it up. Because in order to pick up a light object, you can't pick up a light object without dismounting unless you're an expert rider.
That's true. So
Well,
Okay.
so someone else just gives it to him, right?
Right.
That's not
Right.
big of a deal.
Well,
So-
no. You can't give a heavy object. You would need a monster
But it's a light
to
object.
give but it's not to the infantry though. The infantry have to do the handing off, and they treat it as heavy, but you can't hand off a heavy object. There's no such thing.
All
We
right.
should
Well,
probably be including
so-
this in the episode, by the way, just so people know how this works.
yeah. All right. So that would require some parsing because we need to read the rule to see whether we need to read the. I'm not sure we need to dedicate time on this episode to
We shouldn't.
answering that particular conundrum. But if you are attempting to take Radagast on Eagle with the mirror in the attempt to carry around the mirror, you should look at that rule to see whether or not Radagast can actually pick it up because we don't know.
Not that we'll comment on this, and I don't think we will, but Matt Hammond's comment about an Ent in Lothlorien, I disagree with heavily, and I'm like, I was trying to figure out, why would I want an Ent in this army? Like, so I wish that we had time to go through that.
So I think the answer to the question is then you have a hitter.
Yeah, but he's a 3 attack, like the thing about an eagle is they fly and they have heroic combats with Guire and all that kind of reason. But an Ent,
part of the benefit of this army is like you get a lot of defense 6 troops that fight 5. Like that's a huge thing about this army is like
right.
You have a lot of the troops are really what do this army really well, and then the heroes synergize very well with the troops.
Here's the thing: you have to bring Treebeard if you bring an Ent. You can't bring Cream.
Yeah, that's
You
a hard
have
thing,
to bring
yeah.
Treebeard.
Oh, I think you want to bring
don't-
Treebeard because you want that 3. I mean, Treebeard essentially
200
becomes
points?
he becomes unkillable at that point.
He is effectively, but he's also Treebeard doesn't
he's
hit
slow and
very
unkillable.
hard. He
To be fair, he could carry the thing with him.
Treebeard
he's
can
definitely
This is like half the
Treebeard
fights anyway.
Treebeard can hit pretty
well,
damn hard.
He'll definitely hit a hero to death, but if you feed him, then like troops, he doesn't like you. I mean, I agree. Like he hits hard, but like whenever a hero hits hard at you, they got to be able to move, and he just like doesn't move.
Yeah,
very-
he is
he's big.
slow. I mean, I think Way here is kind of if you're gonna have somebody carry the mirror, I think
If
Way
you
Here's
take Wahir, or I'm sorry, if you take Treebeard, you're probably not taking Celeborn. Maybe you get away with
I don't know if
Galadriel.
you're ever taking Celeborn anyway.
Oh no, I like Celeborn.
I was
you
gonna
like
say, I was gonna say, we're gonna get into
Celeborn
this.
is Celeborn has
into
become my
this.
new best friend. You want me to go
Yep.
through Celeborn here? right.
Yeah. So let me reintroduce it, and then we'll get right into it.
Oh, I thought we were still on the air.
No, that we're cutting all this. This is
Yeah.
all cut content. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay, so this goes in the bonus feed.
Here's my question. We've got about an hour.
Extended version.
We've got about an hour if we want to keep this to 2 hours. We've got about 12.
If you're a
profiles.
Patreon subscriber,
Yeah, right. All right. Well, if we're keeping this to 2 hours, then we got to move fast on all the rest of the profiles.
Yeah, we'll move fast. I think Lady of Light was like the most controversial, maybe Celeborn a little bit, but
I
everyone
mean,
else.
there's
a lot
certain
of profiles.
profiles that we can just go over really quickly that are really simple to say yes or no to, and like we'll go from there. All right, so we'll go over Celeborn, Rumil, Haldir, kind of relatively fairly, and then we'll kind of everything else is pretty simple to just say yes or no to. All right. All right, and now we're going to move it over to the other Matt, to Celeborn. So, Matt, what is your opinions on Celeborn after reading the profile first?
All right, so let's talk about the profile here. So Celeborn starts off at 130 points. He is an elf with a Lothlorien keyword. He is infantry, and he is a hero of valor because Galadriel wears the pants in that relationship. And he has move 6, fight value 6, 3+, although he doesn't shoot with anything. He has strength 4, defense 4, attacks 3, wounds 3, courage 7, 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. War gear. Celeborn is unarmed, but we can adjust that. So his options are heavy armor for 10 points, an elven main hand and a half sword for 5 points, and a shield for 5 points. And I think everyone will be in agreement that you always buy him this stuff. So he goes up to be a 150-point hero that is defense 7. His heroic actions are heroic channeling, heroic strike, and heroic defense. He shares with Galadriel the never use special rule of if your army includes Celeborn, you can upgrade any number of Galatream Warriors in his warband to Galadriel Guard at a cost of +1 point per model to give them courage 6, which they will never need. He causes terror. He is a woodland creature. He also has the Lord of the West special rule, which allows him to reroll 1 die in the duel and then 1 die when he is striking. And he also has the Lord of Lothlorien special, or Lord of Lorien special rule, which means his standfast is 12-inch rather than 6. And he comes with spells. He has 3 spells. He has Aura of Command, cast on a 2+. So if you run into a terror wall or some really scary creatures, that's something you can pop off for 1 will. He has Enchanted Blades, which is a 6-inch range and a 3+. Enchanted Blades allows him to re-roll basically re-roll all rolls to wound, which is a useful spell on him since he doesn't have a horse. You can kind of make up for a lot of that by casting Enchanted Blades on yourself. And I think it's a rare circumstance that you would ever cast Enchanted Blades on somebody other than Celeborn himself with Celeborn's will. But it allows him to go into combat and reroll all his wounds. And he also has Immobilize with a 12-inch range and a 3+ cast, which is actually a really interesting spell, mostly because a lot of people forget that it's there. So they'll blow their will to avoid the compel or the immobilize from Galadriel, and then they'll heave a big sigh of relief because they think they're safe. And then the next guy that goes is Celeborn, and Celeborn immobilizes them, charges in, and kills them. Obviously the downside with Celeborn is for some reason he cannot get a horse. But with that said, I found him to be a really surprising value add to this list. For a couple reasons. First of all, there is something liberating about having a killy hero who is not on a horse, whom you can just say, yeah, okay, you want to hurl through him? That's fine. You want to Sorcerer's Blast him? That's fine. He'll just stand up again and start killing you the next turn. And on those key moves, when you want, when you're in position, you got like the other hero trapped, you just cast Enchanted Blade on yourself, and then you can go in, you can reroll all your wounds and kill the guy. Plus, he's got the Lord of the West, which means he's got that extra hit.
Extra hit. He rerolls, right?
The extra reroll. Which he usually. So he can actually do a fairly surprising amount of damage, especially since he's not on a horse, which means you can have somebody follow him. Either one elf with a spear or 2 Galadriel Court with pikes follow him around to get some extra rolls in there. He can do a surprising amount of damage. And because he's on foot, he can fit into a bunch of places where, cavalry would not. So, I mean, it's seldom just Celeborn who's coming in and doing the damage. It's usually Celeborn and 1 or 2 of his drinking buddies that are going to get into the other mounted hero. And those some of those extra elves can go two-handed if you want and do some extra damage. So, he can kind of do a lot. And I've actually, I've been playing with him a lot. And every time I play with him, I realize, wow, he can do some damage. And he actually can be kind of a scary guy with all the different vectors he can bring to the table with he can hit, he can cast a key spell. He causes terror, so he's hard to charge. And the other thing is, because he's got the 3 fate, particularly if you've got the mirror around, boy, can he take a punch at defense 7. Defense 7 with 3 fate that he can get back, he becomes very hard to kill. So if he's fighting near the mirror, you can throw him into guys, almost, you can throw him into a troll almost with impunity, because he doesn't care if he loses the fight. He doesn't care if he gets hurled, because he'll just stand right back up again, get whatever damage he took, fade it off, and run back into the fight. And even if he doesn't get hurled, if he just gets rended or something like that, he can quite easily save off all the hits he takes from that troll, and then just get all the fight back and be like, okay, let's go to round 2. So I got to say he's a remarkably tough hero in the context of this list.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of Shagrat, actually, to be honest. Like a 3/3/3 hero that's on foot, and you don't really know much. I know I've actually played against him with Nick Gardner, I believe, a while back, and he shocked the heck out of me. And even seeing Nick play him at tournaments too, at low points, I was like, oh wow, this guy just doesn't die. He kills stuff. Late game, when everyone's out of might, you have him with an Elven Blade at 6/5. Like he's no slouch at all. Like, and then I even want to highlight too, like a low point army. Like he's a really good leader.
No,
Oh yeah. So I mean, basically, I think one of the most underrated things about Celeborn is his magic. The ability for him to re-roll to wound or get that second immobilize, what Matt said, is insanely massive. You basically get another, and I know that it's 3 will, so it's like, oh no, you're using your will when you need. Most of the time, especially with the army bonus, where he gets a free die to recast spells anyway, you don't really care. And guess what? If you fail, at the end of the day, if like Matt said, you have the mirror to get your fate back, and if you need to, you can just call heroic defense, and he just goes, you're not killing me, you're not touching me this round anyway. Like the heroic defense is another huge thing about him as well. And even though it's elves and you don't really need them to do this, and I mean it is by far the worst spell he has. And I mean Aura of Command isn't a horrible thing, even though it's on elves. Of course, it's not great by any means, but the ability to just say, everybody is charging in no matter what. That's another.
Well, you find you bring the Aura of Command if you ally around.
Yeah, and that'll be another.
When I ally is when I
Yeah.
So
but even with elves, if there's a -1 around, they're effectively Courage 4. So, if you're fighting against a terror wall or a bunch of scary monsters, it's often worth just sending, because you could do it you spend 1 will at the beginning of the game and it's up, and then it's nice to just not have to worry about blowing a courage test.
Yeah,
unlike the key elf,
which can happen.
Yeah.
So,
Celeborn is the most annoying hero I think I've gone against in a while when playing SBG. And the reason I say that is because what Matt said, where he's just so hard to kill, but then he can do so much damage himself. Because what people forget about Celeborn as well is you add a banner near him, right? And so then you get a banner reroll to his 3 dice. But then he also has Lord of the West. So then he basically has 5 dice to win the fight. And then he has 3 dice to kill. And then
plus any spear supports.
Plus spear supports, exactly.
Or pike supports.
Yeah, or pikes, which actually I probably do more often.
So think about it like this, right? Let's say you get on a hero and he's on foot. And let's say that hero was Shagrat, we'll say, for example, right? So Celeborn goes 2-handed and he says to himself, okay, I'm going 2-handed. I've got 2 pike supports behind me. I have a banner supporting me as well. I'm going to cast Enchanted Blades on myself, so I'm re-rolling to wound at +1, right? So let's say I was able to somehow manage to get a trap off on him at that same time. So he has essentially 6 dice re-rolling to wound with +1 to wound, and he is killing literally anything. I mean, strength 4 +1 to wound, 6 attacks, re-rolling. I don't know many things that are surviving that, to be honest with you.
Smaug will survive.
Yeah. Smaug, Balrog, those, so on, of course, those kind of. But
Galadriel will survive it.
Galadriel will survive it.
or another Celeborn.
Yeah.
So the bane to what I just said is heroic defense by all means, of course. But, I mean, he's basically unkillable to an extent. He can dish out damage when he absolutely needs to with that Enchanted Blades. And if he needs to immobilize something to then move on to, like Matt said, he can do that as well. I love Celeborn in this list.
So I have a question about Celeborn. So I really like him, and I'm just wondering, so Aura of Command is an exhaustion spell, right? So
if you lose your...
Yeah, so you have to have at least 1 will point remaining at the end of for it to cast, for it to stay around. So you start on 3, if you were to cast it at the beginning of the game, then you go down to 2,
Mhm.
meaning that you only can cast one other spell once. in
But
the
this is
game.
a situation where it doesn't happen very often.
Sure.
where-
So
Yeah.
I'm just basically trying to figure out. So, in what situations will you be starting the game casting Order of Command versus in what situations you'll be basically just leaving it and then seeing what
You're
happens
fighting
later?
Angmar.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you're fighting, if you know you're going to be fighting a
very,
terror wall.
very, very few armies are you using Aura of Command.
And a
Very
terror
few.
wall that gives you -1 because
-1 terror wall. Yeah, exactly.
Because here's the thing that's kind of a weird thing, but you notice it after playing SBG for a while. Evil armies hand out the -1, but don't have a lot of terror, like monsters and stuff, but like terror walls, like they don't have it. It's very difficult for them to actually get that. Angmar's like probably one of the only ones that can actually do it in
Well,
evil.
The Black
You
Numenorians.
know,
And Black Numenorians.
Black Numenorians with a ring right behind
Yeah.
them.
So that's the most common two that I've seen. Other variants like half trolls and whatnot, but for the most part, that's what you're going to see. Good has a heavy access to terror bubbles, but doesn't get the -1 very easily. So if you're fighting a good army with terror, honestly, I'd probably just rely on my Courage 5. Like,
And I'll speak because I know I've talked to Nick about this. Well, Nick, for anyone who doesn't know, is very well known for playing Galatrum. He'll almost swear to never use Aura of Command because he'll always say to himself, I've got Courage 4 no matter what. Doesn't really matter to use that.
Yeah.
I'd rather use that on another Enchanted Blades or Immobilize.
And it's probably a route you're almost always going to go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
99% of the time, I'd say you're almost never using Aura of Command. But that 1% time, it is helpful.
And the only time I can think is Angmar.
Two other issues with that. One is that Aura of Command, the need for Aura of Command against a terror wall army will diminish over the course of the game because the stuff that's causing the terror will tend to die. So probably by the late game, you can say, all right, to heck with Aura of Command. I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to use my last point of will to cast an offensive spell. And also, Celeborn is one of those figures within this army that really synergizes with the army bonus because it allows him to always get. I mean, he is a guy that can get away with just not spending will to resist spells and just relying on the magic resistance because he's not, especially since he's not on a horse to begin with. He doesn't have to worry about getting knocked over and losing his horse. And like we've said, he can take a punch even if he's transfixed. So he can just say, what, I'm going to dedicate, even in a magic environment, I am going to dedicate all 3 of my will to casting spells. And I'm just going to rely on resistant to magic to avoid spells.
And I guess if you're really worried about it, you can just upgrade your guys to Galadriel Guard and get that +1 courage.
There you go.
A use.
I just want to check real quick with everybody what their opinion is. Let's say 700 points plus, right? Are you taking Galadriel and Celeborn, or in your opinion, can you only take one or the other?
I think. Well, I mean, if you're not allying, then yeah, you would take both.
Okay.
He is the logical.
Now
next
I'll get
best
on
pick.
to that. I'll get on to that in a few profiles because I'm curious what you
Okay.
guys.
All right. That'd be interesting.
We'll move over to Rumil next, so I'll move that over to Rainier.
All right, so I'm gonna cover Rumil. He is one of Haldir's brothers. He's kind of a unique profile, but kind of also basic to the Lothlorien list. He is Fight 6, Strength 4, D7, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, Courage 6. Typical 3/1/1 hero. His actions are only heroic defense, and his only options for war gear are an Elven Cloak. He's Hero Fortitude at 85 points. One of his main special rules, though, is his Swift Parry. So basically, you can cause your opponent in the same fight to reroll one of their D6 dice. Of course, they do this before they use Might. Yeah, so he's kind of like a wild card in a way. I see him actually quite often in lists. I know Nick Gardner sometimes takes him, I think. There is a guy from actually Matt's Wojciech. Remember Wojciech, the Polish guy? He used to bring Rumil with Theoden a lot, and I play Rumil for fun in my like thematic Lothlorien lists, like when I play with friends. But he's actually quite a bit of a stubborn guy to kill, because with the defense 7, his swift parry rule, and his heroic defense, and then I want to also piggyback on everything we talked about with the mirror. If you play a pure list with the mirror, he's reoccurring fate and might and all that. Like, he's just really hard to kill. I find that he's really good late game, because you're just go up against him, Elven Blade, like we mentioned with Celeborn, Elven Blade defense 6, or excuse me, fight 6, swift parry rules. So you're gonna have someone like Aragorn roll 3 dice and get like maybe a 2, a 1, and a 6, and then he can be like, yeah, reroll that 6, and then you roll like a 3 or something. Like, I just find him to be quite annoying. I wouldn't say he is necessary in a Lothlorien list, but I would say definitely consider him in one. I always consider him. Whoever's gonna choose talk about Haldir, I'd probably choose Haldir over him, but I just think, and you guys will probably agree with me, he's just really annoying to play against. And with the army bonus of Will and the mirror, he's just pretty hard to kill as well and get rid of for a 3/1/1 hero, like we mentioned beforehand. This takes the 3/1/1 hero, this list, and makes them actually quite hard to kill.
I mean,
D7
I guess
too.
my only issue with him is that your point about him being annoying to kill is particularly all he's good at. So, not with fight 6. He's pretty solid at dealing with most human heroes. He's a solid hero overall. Like, but if you don't have the heroic march already in your list, if you don't have like the heroic strike or other methods to get rid of big heroes, if you don't have the things that can kill through troops, then you're gonna have to go and get that. Which is why maybe you might be alluding to Haldir being chosen more, but otherwise, yeah, as your final pick hero, like your 3rd pick or 4th pick in your list, I can see some value add in him being that annoying thing that I'm like, all right, I'm going to go take care of this Balrog real quick. So where he just holds him in place forever. Yeah.
I mean, I'd almost consider him as the 2nd pick, just because he's the tank, right? And he's much more of a tank than Haldir is. So, you know, if
Haldir's
you're
like not a tank at all, Haldir's pretty fragile, actually.
Yeah, Haldir is fragile, and Rumil is a guy that you can be like, yeah, I'm going to send this guy into Aragorn, and you know, it's going to be a while before, you know, with 3 might to call heroic defenses with, it's going to be a long time before you get through Rumil, and all that time he's having to, you know, fight 6 heroes are going to have to burn might to deal with him, because they got to strike up against him, and then he's calling the heroic defense.
He kind of reminds me of Ingold from the Minister's list, where he just has might for like heroic moves and heroic defense. He won't die. He'll hold the line, but like you find that like, oh, you need maybe march more than just his heroic defense, or you might need more killing power, whether that's through Haldir in the shoot phase or allying in like Guahir or something. I think that's my problem with him, is just, yeah, he fits that Ingold kind of.
He just does that one thing.
Formation, yeah, and it's for 85 points. I mean, even we compare him to other 3/1/1 heroes, even Hurin for similar points, like can still kill stuff really easily. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to see Rumil heroic combating with his like in destroying battle lines and whatnot. He just,
well, I mean, you might, because remember, he's on foot, which means sometimes he's going to be fighting with buddies, and you know, he is kind of that guy who, like, he's the guy who's calling the heroic moves, and you know, Celeborn's saving his might for strikes. Rumil's a guy that's calling the heroic moves and going in. You know, Rumil can go in on foot with Celeborn, and you know, one calls a heroic combat, the other calls a heroic strike. So he's surprisingly useful for 85 points.
And I don't want to come across as I don't like the guy. Like, I actually do like his profile. I just feel like he's that pick after you've satisfied the other requirements of your list. That's me
Yeah,
personally.
I'd agree. I'd agree with that too. Like he's a really good model, but I just still would. I don't know. I'd probably choose Haldir over him.
I would. I mean, every list that I've played is pretty much almost every list that Nick has taken. It has been Rumil's included, and anytime I go against Lothlorien, Rumil is my first target because he is the most annoying model to get off the table because he can basically, if you have like a ring wraith or let's say a decent hero in general, right? Even though he has relatively fragile stats, what you're banking on is the fact that he's just going to hold them up, because you're just, even if he gets that 6, as long as he doesn't get another second die that's relatively high number, I mean, he's going to basically just keep, he'll take out your horse one turn because he rolled low, and then, take out your, do a little bit of damage here. Now you're not throwing him into like Aragorn, of course, but
No, actually, I would throw him in there.
Yeah, you probably would.
no,
Yeah,
Aragorn. No,
Well, like
I
you think LSR? I wouldn't throw him into LSR, but maybe
Yeah,
like,
anybody
I meant
I think
LSR.
you're referring to
Yeah.
LSR.
I was referring to LSR. That was my problem. I was referring to LSR because LSR just chomps through him.
Or Boromir be like,
4 up to wound plus knockdowns and all that.
Yes,
You
so
probably clear
I'm
him in
not-
turn. Yeah.
talking
well, maybe
about
the defense might help.
Yeah,
it. Maybe
you-
The
you
heroic,
could-
that's what I was going to get onto. The heroic defense is everything on Rumil. That heroic defense has saved his butt. And basically, if like the amount of times I've gotten 1 or 2 models onto him, and then I've just, I've tried to kill him, but then he goes, nope, heroic defense. So he survives a turn, and then he gets away from it the next turn, and then he just moves, and he just keeps, and you know what? Obviously, he's just strength 4 with 2 attacks, so he's not going to do a ton of damage to troops. But, he might kill 1 or 2 troops a turn, and then, move on to the next one, and then, but, I mean, his ability to hold up heroes is so frustrating. And so I always try to get him off the table as soon as possible because he is that big of an annoyance to me personally. I like Rumil a lot personally. Any other thoughts on Rumil? Okay. We will move on to his brother, Haldir. So I will move that over to Mick.
So Haldir, also known as the weaker Legolas in this game. So Haldir is 70 points. Comes with fight 6, 3+, strength 4, defense 4, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 6, 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. His wargear is an elven made hand-and-a-half sword, and he has options of a heavy armor for 10 points, elf bow for 5 points, and elven cloak for 5 points. So very often he will be going up to 85, wearing heavy armor for defense 6 and an elven bow. His heroic actions are heroic accuracy, strike, and strength. And then onto his special rules. He has expert shots, so he's able to shoot twice during the shooting phase. Woodland creature, just like all the other elves. Then allies till the end. Haldir is counted as being in range of a banner and automatically passes all courage tests if he is within 12 inches of either Aragorn or Theoden. And his other rule is 1 final blow. If Haldir is slain in close combat, he may immediately make 1 strength 4 strike on each enemy model that was engaged with him in the fatal fight. So Haldir is actually is the second hero in this list with a heroic strike outside of Celeborn. And
1 of 2, actually.
Well, yeah. Second out of 2.
Yeah.
And his allies till the end rule suggests that he is actually much better when you actually take him with Aragorn or Theoden, because then he will be rolling 3 dice to win and always passing courage tests. So he's actually really good in things like
the Legendary Legion,
the Defenders of the Helm's Deep, Legendary Legion, where he will also shoot his bow at 30 inches if he's standing still. In this list in particular, that rule doesn't matter at all if it's a pure list. His other rule of making strength 4 strikes on each enemy, that's potentially really good if he was surrounded, because he might be able to kill 1 or 2 extra models. Essentially, He brings heroic accuracy, which it looks like no other hero in this list gives. So, first of all, elves obviously are known for shooting well, and that goes the same for all of the elf lists. So, heroic accuracy is is one of those really good heroic actions where if someone is keeping important targets in the third or in fifth rank, you can quite easily get through them thanks to rerolls. And then heroic strike here is just one of those things where obviously when we're talking about Rumil, he was really good for just like stunning and surviving. Haldir doesn't necessarily stun and survive, but he's able to win a fight against a bigger threat. So I'm not sure about you guys, but yes, between Haldir and Rumil, it's pretty close. I would actually be tempted to take Haldir over Rumil if I was to be picking a list.
I go 50-50 on these two all the time.
I'd probably go like 75-25 for Haldir, just because then it goes back to the whole shooting thing. You used to be able to bring good shooting with Legless in the list, but I mean outside when we're talking about pure, you can't do that anymore. So many times you see like the shooting Lorien lists don't really necessarily have to take him, but I just don't see why not for what he gives. He's heroic accuracy, heroic strike in case he gets into that role. I don't know. I just like him a little better than Rumel.
Best thing about Haldir is his heroic strike. That like the ability to have 2 heroic strikes is why he is so valuable.
Remember though that the Fellowship is a green ally with this list, so you can just go ahead and throw Legolas into this list. And I mean that's the issue is if I have the points to take somebody like Haldir and I want that guy, I always find myself going, yeah, you know what? I'll pay 30 points more and I'll get Legolas on a horse with his, I will always hit, suddenly he's on a horse. He can still heroic strike. He has heroic accuracy. He can do his auto hit and he's got 3 fate so that if the mirror is with him, I mean, that's the problem I have with both Rumil and Haldir is they don't synergize well with the mirror because they've only got the 1 fate. And a good hit from something that can do a lot of damage can blow through that 1 fate. But Legolas with his 3 fate really gets a great benefit out of the mirror. And I mean, I haven't made a list where I'm like, ooh, I want to take Haldir, and then I'm not then saying, oh, but wait a minute, if I just get rid of 3 more elves, I can upgrade him to Legolas. I'll just do that.
Yeah, well, that's just one of those things where Legolas just seems to be one of the best heroes in the game anyway. So if you can take him, you probably take him into a lot of lists.
And in this army, and in this army, this is arguably the best army at the game at forcing you to come to them, because it's one of the only armies in the game that has blinding light, strength 3 shooting on a 3+. And like all that in the same army, of course. So when you add Legolas to that, where he can almost auto snipe in a blinding light bubble with, let's say, 12 other archers, it's basically like you're coming to me in this army with Legolas. But I actually am curious if you guys had to pick though between Haldir and Rumil, who would you guys pick?
Well, I guess we already have 2 of their votes.
Haldir.
Yeah, my always thought, and I was kind of alluding this to Rummel, is that Rummel only does like one thing well, whereas Haldir is doing a number of things here. And the thing about heroic strike versus heroic defense, I love heroic defense. First off, I mean, against things like a Balrog and stuff, it's a godsend. However, what I like about heroic strike is it actually creates a threat against an enemy hero. Like I could dismount you. I could potentially even kill you. And whereas heroic defense will very rarely offer that.
What I'll say, though, is that they work, in my opinion, in this list, they worked exactly the same, heroic strike and heroic defense, because they're already fight 6 with an elven blade. So there's not many things that are going to get to them without them having to strike first. So if I heroic strike and you heroic strike, I could still lose and you can do damage to me. If I heroic defense and you heroic strike, then you're not causing damage on me, but I made you waste a point of might. So that if it's at the end game, let's say we both run out of might, I'm going to win every time because I have the higher fight value in the.
I can see that excuse actually, that like justification, because you go up against like an Aomir mounted, he comes at you.
Heroic strikes. You call heroic defense.
Yeah, you're a heroic defense, or if he decides not to call heroic strike, you just
In this list, I think
roll
it
a
is
ton
the
of
same
dice,
thing as Heroic Strike.
I think
I
you're,
could-
I
I
think
could
you're
see
dead on
that.
with that, Tim.
Dang, Tim, you're convincing me. I'm dropping back down to 50-50, guys. Holy smokes.
No, I think that's actually.
I mean,
a very
to
good
be fair, I
interest.
have a probably arguably more experience than anybody else at dealing with this army.
And that
you
is true.
play it
You
every
do.
week.
You play against Lothlorien more than any of us have ever probably seen the
Yeah.
army on the tabletop.
But what I want to, we'll get into the fifth character, and then I know we've talked about the Fellowship, but I'm going to get your own opinion on this afterwards. So I want to move into the fifth profile that you would consider. I think there's only 5 profiles in the whole list, pure, that you consider taking for hero options. But we'll get into that in a second. Devon, Galadriel Captain.
Right, the last reasonable pick of this hero in the heroes. So Galadriel Captain, 70 points. It's going to be fight 6, strength 4, defense 6, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, 6 courage, 2/1/1 standard for captains. Going to have heroic march, which is probably the only reason you really even talk about this guy. And then you have, not the only reason. Sorry.
There's another reason.
There is another reason. I almost forgot. The armored horse. And so they can be mounted, which is actually pretty key. Oddly enough, yeah, they have Fleetfoot. Good. All right, so we'll get to that. Elf bow, shield for 5 points, and then expert rider, Fleetfoot, woodland creature. So fortunately, they do have Fleetfoot, which for those who don't know, it allows them to run through the woods even while mounted. All elves do not do that by default. In fact, barely anyone in the game really does it by default. So yeah, I mean, I guess alluding to it, for what is it, 85, then 90 for with the horse, you get a heroic march, but then you get a fast mobile contingent, which if you're going to bring the elven cavalry, which we're going to be talking about, that is a very solid reason to pick this, especially since he's already fight 6. I think elven captains are actually scary still, even though they don't do a whole, like obviously Rivendell ones have the lances, which this guy misses, but the other reason
he still fights 6, defense 7 on a horse.
Yeah,
he's still
that's quite.
He's still
That's
scary.
really scary.
He's still, and that's why I like him. Is like elven captains are actually probably one of the few, I'd say, captains that you still kind of worry about. They're still like pretty heavy tier status. And then bring in the heroic march. So I mean, the best thing about these captains is they can still go against like normal human heroes, like your Aomers and stuff, and still cause a problem. Like Aomer could heroic strike, sure, but at defense 7, you're probably going to survive most of it. So they at least can cause an issue in that regard. But otherwise, the heroic march. Well, I mean, other than what I've just said, basically about him, he's pretty simple. I mean, does anyone have anything to add based on?
I mean, they're expert rider too. So does that mean they could use the fate of the horse, or is that horse lord?
No, they re-roll.
When you get knocked off.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
It allows them to pick up the objective if it's on the ground.
Right.
They can do that, which is if you don't have to dig it up, like in Seize the Prize heirlooms, you have to dig it up. If you don't have to do that, then it's good.
I mean, with Fleetfoot, I think that's actually pretty good in heroic march. You can like zoom pretty far to grab it.
I think you'll shock an enemy when they're hiding behind the woods to protect themselves against you, and then suddenly they forget, like, oh yeah, he has Fleetfoot, he can just run through it.
They are great. These guys, they're great distraction forces. First, they are the only march in the list that you're probably going to take, and they are kind of great flanking forces, especially with their ability to go through woods, where you can just send, in one of those scenarios, like storm the camp or reconnoiter, where you just take a Galadriel captain and like 2 Gallantrum Knights, and they just go off on the other side of the board from the entire army and start, running through the woods to get to the other side of the board. And the other guy's army has to devote a lot of time and effort to dealing with them. And then they just turn around and they run away if the army does that, or they make it through.
What I want to ask you first, do you think if we're going pure Lothlorien, would you take the Wood Elf Captain or Galadriel Stormcaller before we get into the profile?
Are we adding the Stormcaller into that question?
That's what I'm asking. Would any of you consider, like, if you had to take a couple heroes, would you consider the Wood Elf?
I would, but I say this like as like my play style in general is I already take. I mean, we've talked about in these past episodes. Like I already take basic captains from the Fallen Realms all the time. I mean, I always rave about like a fight 5 captain with heroic march is like golden.
No, I'm not.
No,
referring to the
he's talking wood elf captain.
Yeah, not the Galadriel.
Turn the
wood
page.
elf.
Yeah.
Oh, let me
There
turn it.
is-
Sorry, guys. I'm
Okay,
taking
so we're
my
actually
dumb
moving
Libby.
on. So you're actually moving us on, and you're trying to say, is it even worth? Is there any
Well,
reason
we'll go
ever
over
to
the
take these last two?
Yeah. So basically, what I'm saying
All
though
right.
is there's 2 more profiles for heroes. We'll go over them relatively quickly because there's not a whole, in my opinion, not a whole lot of use to either one of them. But
Yeah, I can't.
would you guys agree that these are the 5 heroes that you're choosing from when you're choosing?
Yeah.
Hero?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I cannot see any reason to ever.
I mean,
pick the next
Stormcaller
two.
brings some cool magic, but I mean, you want to bring.
I'll get into the Stormcaller
heroes.
when we move on to him.
There's
real
just
quick.
no way you're going to cast one spell 3 times at best, and then
Lead
done.
6
Unless you roll a
guys.
6.
And lead 6 freaking guys. Yeah, unless you roll a 6. So it's like,
So what I'm going to ask you guys is that if you had to pick in most higher points lists, let's say 700 plus, you're probably taking 3 heroes. Which 3 heroes would you be inclined to take out of the list?
Well, why don't we wait till we get to lists on that?
Do you want?
okay, maybe if we have time, I suppose, because we got a lot of warriors to cover.
All right. Well, let's blow through the Warriors, and then maybe we can talk about 1 or 2 lists.
Okay. So let's let's go over the Wood Elf Captain real quick. Matt, if you want to go over the Wood Elf Captain real quick.
So Wood Elf Captain, he has he's fight 6, strength 4, defense 4, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 6, 2 might, 1 will, 1 fate, pretty much what you would expect from a captain that didn't come with armor. He has elven made sword and an elven cloak. His heroic actions are heroic march. He can get an elf bow for 5 points, throwing daggers for 5 points, and a wood elf spear for 5 points, and he is woodland creature. And he's basically, I mean, what you get out of him is you get an elven cloak. What you lose out of him is once he gets into the fight, he is defense 4. And that is a really scary thing to have on a hero that you're still spending at least 70 points for, because you're probably going to give him either a bow or the throwing daggers or something. And I think the point being, it's hard to come up with a circumstance where you want to take this guy over the regular elf captain on a horse. I mean, one thing, this list is somewhat like the Easterlings list on the evil side, where you find yourself never quite having as many points as you want to do what you want to do because you've got a bunch of expensive warriors, and it's hard just to justify spending 65 points on a guy that's defense 4.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments? I think for me that's about it with him. He's just
terrible.
He's for theme. It's pretty much that's it. You use him for theme.
Nice figure though.
It is. It's a nice looking figure.
Have we actually featured him before in our list of 5 worst heroes in the game or something like that?
Yeah.
But I think he probably would. I don't think we put him on the list, but I think he's definitely an honorable mention.
Okay. So Rainier, the Stormcaller.
How not to
Okay.
make a profile.
Yeah.
Okay, so Stormcaller's fight 5, basic kind of caster stats: strength 3, d4, 1 attack, 2 wounds, courage 5. He's 1/3/1 woodland creature. He has 2 magical powers. One's Call Winds, the other's Enchanted Blades. We kind of addressed Enchanted Blades with Celeborn. But Call Winds is basically what you guys, it's a 12-inch range, cast on a 3, and you knock someone off their horse or fell beast, which I see it actually being used against that a lot. But they basically go flying. The one kicker is that powers of nature, if you roll a 6 when you cast something, you get the wheel back for free. But as a minor hero, when you don't really have that many points and you want to max out your war bands to get more troops, we'd probably all agree on this. He's not, with what the options you have, he's not really that good. I have seen him used back in the Fell Beast meta quite often, actually.
Well, that was a different time, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
different time.
And it was a
Now-
different spell for Call Winds.
Yeah.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Nature's
how this
Wrath.
got
It was a
nerfed.
2d6 For the normal call wins, 2 up to cast, 2d6 pushback. That means even if they weren't mounted, you're throwing him a potential 12 inches back. You have removed a hero for like 3 turns.
Yeah.
So that's
So
a very different situation.
We can all agree this guy just isn't good.
If you have 60 points in your list to spend on this, take the 60 points, take either Rumil or Haldir and upgrade him to Celeborn.
There you go.
I'm going to say one more thing before we move on to the Warriors. I personally wish they just kept his profile the same, but just made him a minor hero. The reason I say this is because even though he would have had Nature's Wrath, it just makes you want to take him. You know what I mean? He's a minor hero. He can only, he can only take 6 troops. But he has that ability where he can Nature's Wrath. And then what would have made him so good was that you basically have a character who only has 1 might. So you have to choose March over him. You have to choose more troops over him. You know what I mean? So it makes him difficult. But then if you threw those 3 dice all at once, as long as one of those dice is a 6, you get all 3 back. And then it forces them to be use their will to make sure that they don't get, even if you made it like a 3-inch Nature's Wrath instead of 6. Like I wish they would have kept Nature's Wrath on this model.
I think they purposely didn't keep it because it was 6 inches before, and they were tired.
If you made it 3 inches, I'd be fine with this model.
I mean, there's a number of different fixes you can make, but I mean, I don't. This is one you just for all you watching, just move on from it. It's just not worth it.
Right.
We are going to move on.
I have 3 of them, and it's like, well, what do I do with them?
Yeah.
You wait for the next edition. Keep them and wait for the next edition.
Wouldn't you rather them have Nature's Wrath at least on a 3-inch thing so that they have some use to them?
I mean, like I said, there's a lot of different ways. I don't want to go too far into they should have done it like this, but like, it's just for right now, they are beautiful models you sit on your shelf until the next edition of SBG. So.
Hopefully they get better. That's what we'll say. Hopefully they get better. We'll move on to the Galatream Warriors. I'll move that over to Nick if you want to just go over it real quickly.
So Galatream Warrior is basically an elf with some, it's just like any other armored elf. So it's 5/5, hits on 3+, strength 3, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 5. Heavy armor, elven mage, hand and half sword. Then he's able to bring a warhorn, a banner, an elven a bow, shield, and spear. So he's just like any other standard Rivendell high elf warrior and so on. So there isn't really very much to say. They'll be in your army, and there's going to be a lot of them.
Yep. It's a very good. I mean, there's no other alternative basic warrior choice other than the Wood Elf warrior, but really that's more of a specialty troop in this list. So
I am happy they increased them a point and gave them heavy armor in this edition because it was one of those.
They and I think you always want these guys to be at defense 6 if you can.
Yeah.
And like I said when I was talking about this, is kind of like the Easterling army of the good side is. This is one where you want to have as many of your guys doing kind of being as tough as they can and to protect your investment and being as multi-role as they can. And I tend to take these guys either as, I always get them the shield and they're either going to be, just shield and sword or shield and spear or bow and spear. Because this is not an army where you want to have a guy that just has a sword or just has a bow. And I mean, if you can, part of the problem with these guys is the way they kind of come in the pack, where I think you only get like 4 shields in a pack or on a sprue of
unless you're a
guys.
hobbyist, it's brutal.
Well, I mean, fortunately, I am a hobbyist, so I have gone through and I've converted so like everybody has a shield, and I now have like 10 of these guys with bow spear. But I think you have to do that in order to make these guys as points effective as you can. Fortunately, the models are actually great because of the different poses that are in the models. There's a lot of mixing and matching you can do. So that guys with like bow and spear can actually look really good, where they've got like they're thrusting with a spear in one hand while holding the bow in the other hand. There's lots of hobbying opportunities with these figures, and I think you want to take advantage of that as best you can.
Okay.
Let's come with a Warhorn, by the way. So
Yeah.
if you were to do Warhorn and the +1 Garage from Celeborn or Galadriel,
You'd
you
be
could have an
Courage
army
7.
of Courage 7.
See,
And then you
And
could
Aura of
cast
Command.
Aura of Command. Exactly. Then you got it covered.
we've got courage covered, people. It's if you are afraid of not charging, this is the army.
This
You
army
take
will make sure you
Warhorn,
always
You
charge.
take the upgrade, boom, Aura of Command.
For any new players out there, do not ever do this. We are joking.
Don't do any of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so Devon, you get the most effective model in the game,
Woohoo!
the Galadrium Knight.
So the Gallantrum Knight is 18 points, which when compared to other cavalry in the game is kind of like probably the hurting point. But it's fight 5, strength 3, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 5. So basically the warrior of Lothlorien, or Galadriel Warrior. And they come with heavy armor, elf-made swords, which is awesome, armored horse, which is actually easily forgotten, but they have defense 5 horses. And they have an option for a banner, which you'll probably likely never take unless you have like a lot of these in your list. And then elf bow and a shield. And they are expert riders, fleet-foot, and woodland creatures. So here's the thing. If you're playing in a Lothlorien list, I can see the merits of bringing like a few of these guys. You'll have that cavalry contingent for those missions that actually need it. You will have someone who can pick up objectives and still run. So that's awesome about them. Move to the woods as a cavalry model. I still think there are valid reasons to want to take a few. Are you going to do the whole Rivendell Knight thing and bring like 18 of them? Probably not. They're a little expensive for what they're bringing to the table. They don't do a hell of a lot extremely well other than just being that cavalry model. So like when we talk like Minas Tirith Knights, they're doing something kind of far more effective. I know you get fight 5, courage 5 cav here, but like if you're just trying to perform the duties of a fast mounted model, then you kind of want to get that for cheaper if possible. And that's really all these guys do. But maybe Matt and Tim or anyone else who has experience with these in heavy amounts has found a creative use.
Nope.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have been throwing like 2 of these guys in to accompany my mounted captain, and I think that's probably enough. And maybe, at bigger points levels, you may be throwing 1 or 2 more just to help. I mean, they have all the usual uses. They can run through woods, which is useful on heavy terrain boards. They do have the extra expert rider, so they are useful for like picking stuff up, and darting out and picking stuff up. And I mean, they're overcosted, but I think they're only slightly overcosted. They're only overcosted by probably like a point or 2.
So let me clarify. I didn't mean to say they were overcosted. I don't think I mentioned that word. It's more points than you want to pay for the duties that they're performing. So, which is a very different statement in my mind than overcosted.
Well, I mean, I think if you kind of if you do the math on this relative to the Rivendell Knight, I mean, I think they are probably a point or 2 more than kind of the sum of their parts.
So maybe they're possibly overcosted as well. I would
say they're overcosted.
It's a small amount, and if you're only getting a couple of them, that's fine. The other thing is it's not clear to me that they're overcosted if you are getting the army bonus, because then you've got a cavalry figure that's resistant to magic all of a sudden, and that's you don't have to worry about. You do have to worry about them getting sorceress blasted off, but they're less likely to get sorceress blasted off. They're less likely to get kind of commanded 5 inches away where the ring wraith can jump on them in heroic combat. That's a decent bonus, but it's an expensive list. I don't think you take a lot of them, but I think you definitely are going to take a couple of these guys to kind of check the cavalry block and do the cavalry stuff.
Any other thoughts? Okay. I'm going to say this. Everybody else might have an opinion. I think this is the best infantry model in the entire game for troops, which I'll move to Matt, which is the Guard of the Galadriel Court.
All right. So the Guard of the Galadriel Court at 12 points is Elf, Lothlorien Infantry Warrior. It is move 6, fight 6, strength 3, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 6. It's heavy armor and a pike. You can replace the pike with a banner for 25 points. Never, ever do that. You have, it has woodland creature. It has the Karis Galadriel fighting style, which is a lot of words for saying they can shield, even though they don't have a shield. So, I mean, the use of these guys obviously is you have 3 or 4 of these guys in your list. They lurk in your back rank, and they wait to see where the fight 5 guys are coming into combat or the fight 6 heroes are coming into combat with an ordinary guy, and then they go and they stand behind that guy. And all of a sudden, you're going to start winning ties against ring wraiths, and the big fight 6 heroes are going to have to start calling heroic strikes in order to guarantee a win, which means that they can't call a heroic combat.
You're beating ring wraiths, winning ties against them?
Yeah. Winning tie die rolls against them. Because
if ring wraiths are fight 5.
Yeah, I know. That's why you win a tie die roll.
Okay, so
yeah. And given that usually the front rank is going to have an elven blade, even against fight 6 guys, you're winning ties more than half the time. And Evan has told me on multiple occasions that he absolutely hates these guys. They're expensive. You do not want an army of these guys. But they are, especially since they're defense 5 rather than defense 6. But a few of these guys to kind of lurk behind the lines and get behind the key figures is kind of what you want to do. And they're really great for just kind of bollocksing up the other guys' hard-hitting heroes when they try and come in and manhandle your elves.
They are arguably they're the biggest annoyance to anybody who doesn't have a fight 7 or above hero. They
which
basically
is most armies in the game.
Which is most armies. I'd say it's probably 85% of armies who have fight 6 and below. It is
if they even get to fight 6.
You guys may have your own opinion. I think it is the most annoying model in the game. And not in a bad way, but I don't like fighting these because my heroes can't do anything with them.
I think the most annoying army in the game title would be tough to give it, but it is definitely one of the most efficient.
Well, I'm saying not army, but this is my least favorite model to see on the table because I just know that my heroes are basically going to do very little in that game unless I get those things out of the way. Because even if you have Aragorn, Aragorn's going to have to use extra might just to fight. He's using his might just to simply fight in the game. Where these guys will basically say, no, you're not doing anything. And if you don't have someone like Aragorn who has, a free might point every turn, like a Boromir, who even though he has 6, he's using his might to strike or, something like that, or a normal fight 6 hero with 3 might. They can hold off so many things. I'm a fan of the model. I just really don't like seeing them on the table when I'm against them personally. And that's not to say I hate them. I know when I see these, my heroes are almost neutralized for the most part.
To be fair, you do see it every week. So
I know, but unless I'm taking Bolg or Azog or another version of elves, my heroes aren't doing anything in that game. Basically, it's just all about my troop.
I'll agree with the central idea of your point is that they are extremely effective, and just like Matt said, you don't take an army of them, but you take enough to be annoying where they lurk in the background and keep supporting. And also the comments we alluded to earlier, they also are great for Celeborn or Rumo or whoever. You just stack 2 of them on there and then help them win that fight, and even if they fail, well, Rumo's got heroic defense, Celeborn's got heroic defense, kind of thing that you could use.
This is the annoying thing about them in this army specifically too. A lot of the times, most of the time you see these guys, they're going to be in pike formation where they're going to have 2 of them. So you think to yourself, okay, I'll compel or what is the other version of it for the good guys?
Command.
Command. They'll compel or command the middle one out of the way so he doesn't get any spear supports. and he'll basically just be fighting by himself, right?
Hmm.
But no, because they have the resistance to magic, they basically say, I'm staying here. And so in this army list, they go, okay, magic's not touching us that often, and also we're giving fight 6 to fight 5 and below guys, or we're just adding extra dice to a fight 6 model. So they're very good, very, very good. There's no reason you should ever not have at least, I would say, 3 to 5 in your list. In my opinion, I'd have at least 3 to 5.
I can see the argument of up to like 8, probably.
Yeah,
I can see the argument.
I mean, the only thing is that it's Lothlorien and points are precious. So.
Well, I mean, they're not much more than
no. They get a lot of troops. You'd be surprised.
But they
need
need to.
A lot of troops.
They need to have guys in front of them because they really don't give their benefit if like they're the guy that's in the front line fighting the orc, because they're defense 5 and they can die. So you really want to have like, you want to have like 4 regular elves in front of each one of these guys.
Let's be honest. You're mostly using these for where the hero is. Like they are
right.
specifically going. If your hero attacks 2 of your elves, then there's a pike going to be supported by those things. If your hero is fighting a hero, you're putting this on behind the hero.
Yeah, these guys' effectiveness diminishes the more of them that you get. So I think there's diminishing returns here. I mean, ideally, what you want to have is, when the mounted fight 6 hero comes charging in, you want to then, he charges in against one of your ordinary elves. Another ordinary elf charges him. A spear gets behind that guy, and then your pike, or perhaps 2 pikes, gets behind the original guy. So all of a sudden you've got like 5 guys, 2 of whom are fainting. You're rolling 5 dice back at this this hero, possibly with a banner, and you're matching his fight value. And at that point, he's got to call a strike, and he can't afford to lose the combat, because if he does, he's in real trouble because there's like 5 attacks coming back at him.
Okay. Any other last thoughts? No? All right. We're going to move on to a model that was the primary bulk of the army back in the day, but is almost never seen anymore, unless you guys have seen it recently, is the Wood Elf Warrior. So I will move that over to Rainier.
Yeah, so the Wood Elf Warrior is basically a Galadriel that's unarmored. He's going to start out at 8 points. He has an elven hand and half sword and elven cloak. That's kind of like the kicker on bringing him, is 8 points for an elven cloak model. It's not too bad. He has unarmored, so it's basic Galadriel profile, but defense 3. So that's kind of one of the weak spots right there. His options are a banner, an elf bow for 2 points, of course, throwing daggers 2 points, and a wood elf spear. He can shield with the wood elf spear, which is kind of like a bonus and helps him with his defense. I don't know about you guys, but I actually really like this profile. I don't know if I put him on my underused models or who's on my short list of who I thought was really good and underused, but I really like him. I think you can get for 10 points a wood elf with basically elven cloak and an elf bow. For 10 points, which is actually pretty good in my opinion. I see him not so much where you bulk them out as like a battle line, more so when you're trying to save points to get as many numbers in your Galadriel force. I'll see a lot of them in the back ranks with maybe a spear and a bow to kind of fit that double roll whilst saving some points. I know Nick, we talk about Nick does this, but it's a strategy that I use too. And I've even toyed with allying them in to just like throw a whole ton of elf warriors for really cheap. Heck, you could even throw in, like, if you have an extra 8 points, throw in just one of these guys to go get objectives, or have a fight 5 guy for 8 points. He's pretty good. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, I can see the merits of what you're saying, but I have a hard time justifying 11 points for a wood elf warrior with a spear and a bow that can only do that job well. Like, I mean, any other elf I can throw on the front lines and has defense 5. But that defense 3 scares the hell out of me for an 11-point investment. And I get it. Like, Reavers and other models are 3 defense. What's the issue? And it's just like, well, yeah, but they have like 2 attacks and they have other hitting power. This thing literally does that one job. And so I don't like that I'm paying a tax for that Elven Cloak, which Rainier, I agree. Like, if you're going to pay for this Elven Cloak, which you have to anyway, then yeah, give them a bow, let them do that job. But that's my only issue with them is once they're done that job, once the combat lines have met, which in some scenarios is practically immediately, then their roll kind of goes down pretty fast. I mean, then you're like, we'll give them throwing daggers now, like 13 points. And it's like, I can't.
So I think the time of the Wood Elf Warrior army is past. I like to throw a couple of these guys in my army with bows, and they're the guys that go and they sit near an objective behind a tree and they shoot. I mean, it is useful to have a couple of snipers that can just sit in some inaccessible place behind terrain, hopefully near an objective, and force the other guy to devote significant resources to kind of digging the guy out, or else he's going to continue to shoot at your ring wraith, or he's going to continue to shoot at anybody who doesn't have to be into combat. And I think that's a useful role for these guys, but I don't think you get more than like 2 or at most 3 of them.
Do you guys believe that these are not seen as much because they went up a point, or because the Galadriel got better with the defense 5?
These guys are not seen as much because Elven Cloaks no longer benefit you when you're standing in the second rank of a line.
Yeah. They're paying a point for something that's almost useless. Like,
well, okay, so
it's not almost useless, but it's definitely not as kind of meta controlling as it used to be. It used to be a whole thing where you could put, you could have a second rank of Wood Elves that could hide behind your rank of armored Galadrim, and they were invulnerable.
Yeah, it's something
that no longer exists.
You sprinkle it in a way, like kind of you sprinkle it in for, like you said, objective holders, or have like maybe a shooting line in the trees where they can't be seen or something. But yeah, I'd agree, nothing more than like half of your army like it used to be back in the day.
I mean, I still would hesitate with half my army being these guys. Like the fact that once they enter combat, they're going to get ripped up. Just bother. I think that, I think it's a little bit of a combination of things. The Elven Cloak being a lot less useful, let's just say. All right, not useless, but a lot less useful. And then your comment, Tim, about the Galadriel Warriors being better now. I think, there's a lot to be said about the fact that now before you were paying similar points for 2 models that, were pretty relatively fragile, so might as well take the cheaper ones. So that way you can spam them out more. But now you can get a pretty defensible Galadriel Warrior instead, and then now you're like, all right. So
I don't want to get into like the whole like redoing the whole thing, but I guess I'm trying to find ways for things that once were to become again and more. If they lost the cloak and a point, would you consider taking them as a whole army over Galadriel?
Yeah, so you just have to think of them as would this be a model that you would be able to spam? So back in the day, you were spamming, let's say 40, 50, or like 60 of them sometimes in certain lists. And like if you compare that to now, the increase of 1 point might not seem big, but if you look at, let's say, taking 40 of them, that's like 6 or 7 models extra.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, why would you take them for that 1 extra point these days?
I personally hope in future editions they drop the cloak and drop a point, but that's just
you would change the cloak. You would change it to a different type of, because I mean, just
no,
as Matt said,
I just kind of wish they were 7 points, because if they were 7 points, I think you really consider them competing with I'd certainly go back and forth between them and Galatrum.
And that's the thing, is their point cost is too close to another model that does a very good job with your army. So that's relatively the problem. Because honestly, I can
the throwing dagger.
The throwing I mean, the throwing daggers. Why are they still 2 points? I mean, I don't know, but basically, wait a minute, didn't throwing weapons like go down to 1 point now?
Throwing weapons did. The orc throwing weapons did because their shoot value
It was like 5, yeah.
But the Rohan throwing weapons are still 2.
Okay. Well, they're also 8-inch spears.
Yeah, they're
So,
yeah, that's true. They're
yeah.
8 inches, but they're still 2 points.
True.
But yeah, 2 points for a throwing dagger on a wolf is
That's
can't imagine
harsh.
any circumstance where I do that.
Yeah.
Especially since I'd rather just spend 2 points on a bow.
Yeah. I mean, there's just very little. I mean, honestly, like in some lists, you can almost see the merits. Like, if Gildor was a better model, then you'd have 8-inch moving. Like, what else? And then there's some merit to it. So maybe if these guys moved 8 inches and they'd be like this fast scout troop, possibly. But like, just as they are now, there's really no way.
Okay, we'll go on to the last model in the profile in the army, which is the Wood Elf Sentinel. I'll move that over to Mick.
It's actually so dark in the UK at the moment that I can barely see the profile.
Did you want me to read it or?
No, I got it.
Okay.
The Wood Elf Sentinel is 25 points, fight 5, shooting value 3, strength 3, defense 3, 2 attacks, 1 wound, courage 5. He carries a sword, a bow, and an elven cloak. Has woodland creature, and then he has his semi-magical powers. So, enchanting song. A sentinel may sing 1 song each turn, provided they are not engaged in combat. These function exactly like magical powers, except that they are automatically cast without spending will and cannot be resisted. So the 3 songs are the Hymn of Elbreth, range 12. When this is cast, the target friendly model will automatically pass all courage tests for the remainder of the turn. Then we got Eldemar Madrigal. The target enemy model must immediately take a courage test. If the test is passed, nothing happens. If the test is failed, the target model falls under the control of the opposing player, who may then move it up to its maximum move, even if it has already moved that turn. This move cannot be used to enter an enemy control zone, dismount, lay down, perform an action that would cause harm to the target, etc., or anything that would require the model to roll a d6, like a jump test. And the affected model may not move any further that turn. Then the Lay of Gondolin is the somber verse recalls the mighty elf city of Gondolin, a name fit to freeze the hearts of evil beings. So if the sentinel sings the song, he causes terror. So essentially, in summary, it's give terror to yourself, make another model fearless, or move another model if they fail a courage test. So overall, it's just one of those things which at 25 points, obviously you can't really have very many of them. But in a lot of armies, you tend to see like one of them just dropped in, especially, primarily for the
second spell,
yeah, primarily for the second spell, and sometimes also to ensure somebody passes courage test, which in this particular army, if you're going into a pure list, then probably you're not going to be using.
So how likely are you guys to throw these in lists, and how many would you include?
I'd throw one in the list, possibly 2 at 800 points. It's just like that option of maybe like throwing a troll 6 inches back or like negating him from doing something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, basically 25-point Deadmar Spectre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the problem is really the 25-point price tag is like, because Deadmar Spectre does the same thing for cheaper, and then these guys have 2 other spells that are relatively not great.
And
you're not ever going to use.
The 2 attacks too is kind of like at defense 3. You're not going to be like, oh, let me throw him into the battle line. He's kind of like, like a really expensive Spectre or a really expensive Watchers of Karna.
And the Spectre's a defense 5 at least, so they're somewhat,
Yeah,
and
well, defense 5, Blades of the Dead, they're actually solid troops if you spam them out.
Watchers of Karna are like 9 points, so you could get like 3 for the same points as 1.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I never find myself having the 25 points left over in a Lothlorien list to do these. I mean, they do also show up in the Mirkwood list, and that's actually where I tend to see them more. If somebody will throw one of these things in.
Why do you think that is?
So I think that may be because they ally more. And I think that they ally with lake towns, so that the points pressure on the numbers is less important, because you got a whole bunch of lake towners there to beef up your numbers. So you got a few extra points in there to throw in somebody who's got quasi magic.
Okay. before we move on to the allies, I just want to ask you guys again. Out of the 5 heroes we had discussed, which of the 3 would you probably take at higher points values? Because if you were to take a pure list, you're probably choosing between those 5. Which of the 5 would you take?
I mean, 3. I mean, it's going to be Galadriel, Celeborn, and a captain.
Probably.
Is that your guys' opinion, Galadriel, Celeborn, captain?
Yeah, I would agree.
Rainier?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say those are probably to get the heroic march, but yeah, it depends on if I'd take like. I mean, we all agree Galadriel's like essential, but she's not necessarily like you don't have to bring her. You don't have to bring Celeborn. I would possibly switch, not bring Celeborn for maybe more troops.
I was gonna say because I've come up against multiple lists, and I think where this army shines is when you can get as many troops as possible for this army. So like I've seen a list where I believe it was Galadriel, Rumil, Haldir, and I think it was like 44 troops with like 4 fountain court guards and a banner.
That actually would be pretty scary.
And it's so you have like 40.
Very annoying.
You have like 47 models at that point, and it's like, how do you fight through all of this?
And I can see the merit of that. I can't, like, I guess in my mind I wasn't losing that many troops for picking Celeborn, but you're right. I guess it's a double cost. I can see the troops. Yeah, it's like
7 troops.
You lose the benefit of the mirror though, because you got your heroes have 1 fate point.
Well, no, but I'm saying
maybe you don't take the mirror.
But most of the list I referred to didn't have the mirror in it.
Yep.
And
you wouldn't if you're at that point.
You have almost 50 models of elves, and like that's a horde elf list. They're all defense 6. So like you can really hold the line with these guys. And I'm not saying that your heroes are great, but they complement the list. You know, you get Haldir with 2 extra shots with your bows at blinding light, and then Rumil basically deals with all the big heroes by just holding them up, and then your troops chomp through everything else.
Well, do you want me to talk through the list that I had?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to hear.
Okay, so I had 2 lists here. I had a 600-point list and I had an 800-point list. So I'll start with my 800-point Lothlorien list. So I did go with Galadriel. She does in fact have the mirror, and with her she has 1 Galatream Warrior with shield and spear, 1 Gallantrum Knight with shield, 7 Galatream Warriors with shield, 5 Galatream Warriors with bow and spear, and 1 guard of the Galadriel court. The second warband is Celeborn, who is fully kitted out. With him are 8 Galatream Warriors with shield, 4 Galatream Warriors with spear and bow, 2 guard of the Galadriel court, and 1 Galatream Warrior. Oh, I actually forgot to mention in Galadriel's warband, there are the 2 Wood Elf Warriors in that warband that just have bow. And then the third warband is Legolas Greenleaf on horse with armor. So that brings it to 35 models, which is slightly on the light side for 800 points, but you know, they're majority fight 5, defense 6 models, so they're going to be pretty hard to kill. And they have 11 bows plus Legolas in the list. And obviously this is a list it does not have March. So the theory here is that you will come to me because I'm going to have blinding light up. I'm going to have 11 elf bows, and I'm going to have Legolas that can shoot through somebody else's blinding light. And I'm going to make you come to me. So I'm not really that worried about not being able to move quickly. I do have a couple of, I've got 1 Galadriel Knight in here. So if I need to, I can run off and grab an objective. And I've got Legolas on horse if I need him to run off and grab an objective. But this is a list that's designed to maximize the mirror. Every hero in here has 3 fate that can rejuvenate. And I've got 2 strikers here in Legolas and Celeborn. So This is a list that's going to want to basically fight in its blinding light ball, drag you to me, and then when it gets there, carve through its opponents with its heroes that don't really care if they lose a fight because they can come back. I can already tell that Tim is green with envy over this list.
Yeah.
Really.
But that's the 800-point list. So thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously the 835 models kind of bugs me, especially considering you don't have heroes who can chew through your opponent really fast. So generally Lothlorien often reminds me of a list that's like the elf army that's trying to hold the line, and your ability to do that at these higher point levels is reduced. So that's one thing that would bother me.
I mean, whenever I fight this army, I never get scared of this army when it has low numbers, because I just fight them one-on-one, and more times than not, if I have strength 4, I'm winning. Because if I can fight you on lower numbers, I can, get 2-on-1s, 1-on-1s. So like if I have Mirandans versus elves, which tends to be a frequent thing that I fight against Nick with, it's usually, I get 1 orc on 1 elf, and even if he has banner support, I can win the fight because he needs 6s to wound, I need 4 or 5s. I think where this army personally shines is at higher models, but I understand that army list that you make, really any army in the game, it forces them to come to you. It really just, it's like, I've got, how many bows would you have without Legolas?
11 bows and Legolas.
11 bows and Legolas. So if you're doing multiple shots, you've got 14 shots. If you want to snipe, you have a snipe and 11 shots that are all protected. And then you've got, you said Celeborn, right?
Yep.
And then you got Celeborn to fight your heroes. You got Galadriel to help them out. It's a very, very solid list, but I just personally find with this army that the higher the numbers, the more scared I get.
I guess because the heroes just do not hit hard, you're definitely going to you, but then once I'm in your face, I'm not too worried about what's in my face. You have a lot of shutdown with Galadriel, Celeborn having some immobilized I'll forget about, and then Legolas dismounting horses. But I just feel like the slow grind. It's just like Tim mentioned something, that the orc versus the elf. Elves are one of those armies that you want to essentially have 2-on-2 or 3-on-3 type fights. The more dice you're rolling, the better it gets for you. And at these lower numbers, I kind of find that if you can pick them off into 1-on-1 fights and pull them away, you might be able to use terrain to your advantage to keep it. How many pikes and spears did you have? Is half the army, I think.
I have, it's a bunch of spears.
Okay.
So there's 3 guard of the Galadriel court, and then there's 10 spears in addition to that, I think.
And they all have shields.
Actually, there's probably 11. Yeah, everybody's got a shield. I think there may be 11 or 12 spears. So, this is an army it's literally designed to fight in a ball.
Yeah, that's what it's.
Where you've got kind of the outer ring of the guys with shields, and then you've got kind of the inner, and you can space them out even more than so that there's a little less than a figure's width in between them, and then kind of the interlock of the spears around, so that you're basically gonna have to fight this one guy on one guy, one guy with a spear support on one guy with a spear support.
I think another interesting thing to point out about this army, you guys can disagree with me. I personally am not going to budge on this. I think this is one of the only armies in the army lists in the game where a banner is required for this army.
Yeah. Every elf army. That's true with every elf army.
Yeah,
I would always bring a banner with any high fight army. Low fight armies, it's debatable. But
that banner is so incredible. When you make an elf list, whether that be Galadriel, Thranduil, whatever, you already have 25 points deducted. That banner is included.
See, I used to play high elf lists which would have 2 banners in them.
And that makes sense.
Just because I wanted to expand the line as much as possible, and I had Saruman in the middle of it to basically blast away whatever was happening on the sides or to control the game. But mathematically speaking, the banner benefits higher fight value much more than it does the lower fight value.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've actually found in practice that this army does surprisingly well against higher numbers. just because it can use that kind of ball formation to prevent itself from getting flanked, and it can these elves can do a surprising amount of damage in just the 2-on-2 fights, especially with a banner behind them. And even if you want to put if you want to throw the guy in the front and have him strike two-handed, so you can do a decent amount of damage with these guys just in the just because you tend to win so many of the fights.
I mean, you guys could disagree with me. I've seen it used to just annoying effect is the cumbersome rule, where you'll go two-handed with your front rank and then support with the back in any situation in which you feel like you're happy with, and then the +1 is to cut through defense, because I mean, Nick will tell me all the time, the one thing that this army lacks is hitting power. Like it can't really cut through things very well. So anytime you can get a +1, and else it'll happen to me all the time where he'll get the +1 to wound, and most of the time it ends up working out, and then he may not kill, but he was much more likely to kill because of the high fight value. I think cumbersome is fantastic with this army. All right, thank you for tuning in this week. We hope to see you next week. Let us know in the comment section below about any lists, and like we said earlier, leave what your intention is with the list so we have a general idea. So when we're helping you out with the list, we know where to kind of keep it within bounds of that idea. And if you have any ideas you'd like us to review, then leave those as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week, and have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.